listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Welcome to the special 100th edition of the mother of all talk shows on RT and on Sputnik Radio. Of course, the show has been running since January of 2006, but never to the global audience that this platform now affords us. This is the Open University of the Airwaves. There are no tuition fees, and you are positively encouraged to speak back to the teacher. That'll be me, undereducated as I am. It's rock and roll radio with pictures. If you're lucky enough to be able to see them, you already know I've got a brand new set. But some things never change, like the massacres in Gaza that are currently unfolding even as I speak. People all over the world have erupted in demonstrations over the last few days, and it's little wonder why. We'll be talking to some of the finest opponents of what's happening in Gaza, including the greatest living Israeli, Gideon Levy of Haaretz newspaper, the writer and author and commentator. It's all coming up over the next 3 hours. It is the mother of all talk shows.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway.
This is Radio Sputnik.
You guys, you just...
Or all the people in the world.
You guys have to stay safe because, you see, we are literally in danger in Gaza. You see, this is where we live. Explosions and everything. And I can't believe that we're actually living in explosions. When I was born, first 1 year old, I only hear explosions. I never hear happiness. You see, we're in Eid. We're in Eid al-Fitr. And I don't even hear any happiness. Kids are dying. Is this an Eid too? Is this an Eid? Kids dying? I can't believe it. I can't believe the occupiers even do this to us. Like, they have their happy Christmas and Halloween and I don't know what else, but they live happily and we live like horribly. We live in explosions. I can't understand them. Why do you do this to us?
Out of the mouths of babes. In fact, 55 children like her have been massacred by the latest in American-supplied military aircraft, dropping bombs and firing missiles. Not homemade rockets, which ineffectually rise into the sky, often fall down on the people who fired them. Not ineffectual homemade fireworks that get sent over the wire from the imprisoned people of the Gaza Strip, but the very most up-to-date and devastating military hardware has killed almost 200 people over a few days in the Gaza Strip. And this, of course, is erupting every year or so in this most horrific way. It's often said that where there is no justice, there cannot be peace. I would like to reverse that. If there is justice, there can be peace. There must be peace. For if there is no peace in the Terra Santa, in the Holy Land, holy to Jews, Muslims, and Christians, there can be no peace in the Middle East. There can be no peace in the world. If there is no justice, there cannot be peace. But if there is justice, there will be peace, must be peace. That's the message that I want to impart this evening. The horrific scenes which have moved millions of people around the world, though not everyone. I'm seeing on social media the traditional knee-jerk response, blaming the people of Gaza for the fact that for 10 whole years they have been imprisoned in the biggest prison in the world. I'm grateful to the former British Prime Minister David Cameron for that description, from which there is no entry, there is no exit, there are no hiding places, there are no bomb shelters, there is nothing except in the most densely populated piece of land on the earth, a killing field. A killing field in which you can die quietly from starvation, from poisoned water, from no electricity, from no medicine. You can die silently with no one paying the blindest bit of attention. Or you die periodically under this massive bombardment of the world's most powerful airplanes, supplied direct via the largesse of the United States taxpayer to the Israeli armed forces. That's the reality of it. I hear people saying, why are the Palestinians firing rockets from residential areas? There are only residential areas in Gaza. There are no mountains, there are no fields, there's just 2 million people living there. On your screen, if you're watching us, you can see it. No hiding place. No one can escape this. It's shooting fish in a barrel, except they're not fish. They're human beings, emaciated, undernourished, people who have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And I so wish that people would pay more attention. The chronology of this is clear. I see people saying that these airstrikes are in response to Palestinian resistance rockets, but they're not. The first airstrike happened before a single rocket had been fired. So by your own logic, what are the Palestinians supposed to do? If you say, Israel, what else can they do but bomb and missile these ghettos and camps? Because the Palestinians fired at them. Now that you know, and it's easily found, don't hide behind ignorance, that the first airstrikes preceded a single rocket going into the sky. By your own logic, what are the Palestinians supposed to do? But of course, this didn't start 3 days ago, or 3 years ago, or 3 decades ago, or 5 decades ago. This has been going on for well over 50 years. The people that are in Gaza now don't come from Gaza. They are almost all of them refugees in Gaza, surrounded by the barbed wire, through which they can see the very lands that used to be theirs, through which they can see the trees being picked by others that used to be theirs, through which they can see shining cities arising on the ruins of the villages that they used to live in. It's a definition of hell, really. You're a refugee inside your own country, and you can see the land and the house and the gardens that used to be yours. This is the truth of it. You can hide behind your ignorance if you like, but in the end, you will be shown to be deliberately evading this reality. Now, prior to the airstrikes, there were attacks inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest shrines in Islam. just 50 yards from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, tended lovingly by a Muslim family known to me, and in which a century ago Jews and Christians and Muslims busied around in those thoroughfares, living as neighbors, living as friends. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus was laid, is 50 yards from the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was invaded by hundreds of armed so-called settlers, gangsters, who set upon the people praying. All of this was preceded by the attempt to ethnically cleanse East Jerusalem, which legally, can I spell that out in big capital letters to you, is illegally occupied territory, apparently protected by international law from the depredations of illegal settlers, but not, in fact, protected at all. The British government and virtually every government in the world recognizes East Jerusalem as illegally occupied territory, formally demands the withdrawal of Israeli military forces from East Jerusalem. One of the districts of East Jerusalem is the Sheikh Jarrah district, which I know very well. The Palestinians in it are being ethnically cleansed. Their houses are being knocked down to make way for more illegal settlement activity. If you go back further, and we could keep on going back further, this land was Palestinian land. All of it was Palestinian land. When Mr. Balfour, on behalf of one people, promised to a second people the land of a third people, the Jewish population in Palestine was minuscule, a few percents of the whole. And that's the origin of all of this. Now, of course, the scourge of anti-Semitism intrudes its ugly head here. Anti-Semitism which systematically, industrially massacred and attempted to entirely genocide every Jew in the world and succeeded in extirpating 6 million Jewish souls. Young children, just like that girl, young babies, just like my own, were industrially murdered by European Christian fascism in Germany, in Poland, and in the Nazi-occupied territories. The local population of anti-Semites sometimes didn't even wait for the SS to arrive, but packed the Jews onto the trains that ended in the camps and in the gas chambers. But the Palestinian people had nothing to do with that. They are also the victims of that Holocaust, capital H. They are paying the price for Hitler fascism, for Italian fascism, for Japanese fascism, Chinese fascism. They are paying the price for the great crime that was committed against the peoples of occupied Europe, preeminently amongst them European Jewry. The Palestinians are now, this minute, paying that price. Their blood is running in the streets of this prison camp called Gaza. Now, today I spoke in Whitehall, opposite Downing Street, to a crowd of people, and I made this point: that some of the finest, clearest, and most courageous voices speaking out against this massacre in Gaza, speaking out for justice in Palestine, are themselves Jewish. British Jews, American Jews, and Israeli Jews. Speaking out against it because they believe, and they are surely right, that this behavior by Netanyahu, desperate to stay out of prison, desperate to create as much murder and mayhem and turmoil as he can in order to stay in office, in order to avoid going behind bars himself in an Israeli prison. Got to hand it to the Israelis. They've sent more former prime ministers, former presidents to prison than any other country in the world. But look at the mayhem that has been unleashed, and look at the bravery and clarity with which Jews in Israel, America, the United States, and around the world are denouncing this mass murder by Netanyahu. Look at it and salute it. That's what I did today in Whitehall. The film of my speech is available, and what I said was cheered to the rafters. Of course, the supporters of Netanyahu would like to divert your attention to one or two carfuls of revolting, disgusting anti-Semites who were in a car on their way, they say, to the rally that I addressed. The police, I'm glad to say, have now located the cars and are looking for the occupants. It won't take them long. I hope they apprehend them. I hope that they are ruthlessly prosecuted and rigorously punished for the disgusting anti-Semitic comments that they were making from their loudhailer, apparently, according to the Twitter feed that I have seen, with revolting and disgusting and violent threats. As regular viewers and listeners know, there is no time or space for anti-Semitism here on the mother of all talk shows. They are our enemies, and we ruthlessly root them out whenever they show their ugly faces. I should say that anti-Semitism exists in Britain, on the right and on the left, amongst Christians and amongst Muslims. It exists. 5 years ago, this very day, the Fusilier who was brutally murdered, dear Lee, we remember you, 5 years ago, murdered by Islamist fanatics in broad daylight on the streets of London. We will have no truck with anti-Semitism, with extremism of any kind. We will fight it. But some of us are capable of walking in a straight line and chewing gum at the same time. Some of us are able and willing and will never stop, as long as we have breath, denouncing any and all crimes of extremism, of sectarianism, will denounce and oppose all hatred, whether racial or religious or any other kind. We just believe that in order to get peace, you have to have justice. And that's what this show, this evening, and every other evening is all about. So fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be rock and roll radio with pictures. Stay tuned. It's going to be the mother of all talk shows.
Radio Sputnik.
You know, and it's a very, thank you for, you know, I'm a big fan of your show, Gigi. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, you know. I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary McLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, you know, haggis, look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?
Sputnik has been launched to give you a closer look at everything happening in the world. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
the mother of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
Gideon Levy is the finest of Israeli journalists and authors and commentators. His work is extensively followed and read in Israel and indeed around the world. He's the most famous Israeli journalist of them all and the best one. And it's an honor, as always, to remake his acquaintance. Gideon, thank you for joining us on this dreadful occasion. God knows who's dying as we speak. I wonder if you would describe to the audience what the atmosphere is like in Israel in the midst of this carnage.
First of all, George, it's always an honor for me to be in your show. I must say,
thank you, sir.
One of the very few courageous shows who says the truth, who fights for the truth, which fights also for justice.
Thank you.
Now, there is this unbelievable gap between what's going on in Israel and what's going on right now when we talk in Gaza. I must remind you, George, that if I would go now freely with my car from my home in Tel Aviv to Gaza, it would take me like 1 hour and 15. That's the whole distance. And here in Tel Aviv, life is almost normal. I don't want to say it's normal because we went through many sirens in the last days. But finally, it's almost normal, while 1 hour distance from here, it is really a nightmare. I get so many videos from Gaza, which I never saw before. Dead bodies of children, really massacres. It's unbelievable, and we know nothing about it.
Gideon.
Israel is ignoring it, by the way. If you ask most of the Israelis, they are not exposed to those images. They know nothing. They don't want to know anything.
Gideon, was I right in ascribing this latest frenzy in part to the travails of the Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I'll tell you, George, yes and no, because both of us are old enough to remember that those things happened before Netanyahu and unfortunately will happen after Netanyahu. So yes, Netanyahu carries a lot of responsibility about it, but I wouldn't put it only on Netanyahu's policies, because this is Israel. It's not Netanyahu, it is Israel. That's the brutal policy of Israel. And if you go backwards, you see that almost all Israeli prime ministers did the same. So to put it only on Netanyahu is, in a way, to make our life easier, because once we'll get rid of Netanyahu, things will become better. No, they will not become better.
What's the aim of this? It cannot be. This is not an era in which the complete destruction of every Palestinian in Gaza can be achieved, if that was the goal of those who are carrying out this crime. So what is the aim? What is the end game?
First of all, nobody knows what is the end game, because there is no end game. As you remember, it was Henry Kissinger who said once that Israel does not have a foreign policy. Everything is domestic policy. You can say the same about the defense policy of Israel. By the end of the day, it is about showing the Israelis that here we have beaten them, we have humiliated them, we are the heroes. This is the end game in a way. Yes, there is a problem with Hamas. Israel faces a problem with Hamas. I don't want to ignore it. But Israel never tried an alternative way but living on the sword, but using its power with a ruthless way, really, without any borders. And the result you can see in the streets of Gaza. Tens of children are dead right now. Hundreds of thousands of people are looking not the first time in their life, maybe second, third time in their life, for a place to hide, totally helpless. It's heartbreaking.
We are also sadly, both old enough to remember the period in which Hamas did not exist. And the lives of the people in Gaza and under occupation and in the camps in the countries alongside Israel were not very much better. So whilst I'm myself, because I'm not a supporter of Islamism, I'm not a supporter of Hamas, but it's an alibi to some extent, isn't it, that some people reach for to allocate the guilt in this picture to Hamas.
Hamas is the best gift that Israel could expect. And therefore, Netanyahu is doing anything possible to strengthen Hamas and to weaken the Palestinian Authority and the Fatah. Because would the PA, the Palestinian Authority, be stronger, Netanyahu and other Israelis would have been challenged. Why don't you go for an agreement? Why don't you negotiate with them? But that's exactly what Israel does not want to get into. Hamas is the best solution because nobody expects Hamas to be a partner for a dialogue, even though, by the way, George, I must tell you, I believe that even Hamas people are reasonable people, and I believe that we could talk to them, we should talk to them, and we could have gotten into at least an interim agreement with them. But in any case, you are right. Hamas is a gift for Israel.
Another of the new characteristics of this particular episode, relatively new, is the ugliness we have seen inside Israel itself, in places like Haifa and Acre and Jaffa. We have seen violence against the Arab citizens of Israel in the wake of these horrific events.
Yeah, this is really the new development which bothers the Israelis much more, I believe, than what's happening with Gaza, because this is in our direct backyard. I mean, Jaffa, as you remember, George, is like 10 minutes away from Tel Aviv. And this is inside Israel. And it's not only about the violence toward the Israeli Palestinians, they also took some violent measures. It is almost on the eve of a civil war. We are not there, by all means not, but the threat is in the air. It can deteriorate into a civil war, and everyone here is very scared of it.
Does anyone have an alternative political program that is finding any kind of audience? Or, I mean, I saw Mr. Gantz, who was Mr. Netanyahu's opponent, promising that Gaza will burn, making the point you made earlier that actually it's not all down to any particular venality of Netanyahu. Is anyone? I mean, once upon a time there was, when I lived in Shankin Street, near to Dizengoff Square, there were all kinds of people who had an alternative program for negotiation, for settlement. Have they all disappeared? Are you the last man standing?
I'm not the last one, but there are very few who still believe in any kind of settlement with the Palestinians. There is no peace camp in Israel anymore. There is a very clear majority which supports the continuance of the occupation, which supports Jewish superiority. And I'm not talking about a majority of 60%. I'm talking about 90, 95% of the Jewish population in this country are speaking in the same voice, and therefore the chances for any kind of settlement in the short run are really nil, zero, don't exist.
And I suppose, and they'd be correct if they were making this assumption, the neighboring Arab countries, indeed the Arab countries in general, it turns out the Arabs have got a league. It's very much a minor league, but the Arab League has completely failed to rise to the occasion. Only Russia actually has tried to make the Security Council intervene in this situation and demand a ceasefire. So there's no Arab factor, is there?
Unfortunately not, but it's not new. The Palestinians are more lonely today than ever before. They really, I don't remember a stage in which nobody cares about their fate as today. Western Europe lost interest. It's all about lip services. We don't bother to speak about the United States, who never cared about the Palestinian problem. And they are really left alone. The Arab world really betrayed them again and again. And, from lip services. And even Russia, I must tell you, George, we have to realize that it's not time for condemnations anymore. It's not time for talkings anymore, because Israel learned to ignore all of them. It's time for actions. And I don't see anyone, including not Russia, and for sure not the United States, is ready to take measures, is ready to take actions toward the Israeli aggression.
And how is your work received? To many people watching, as well as intense admiration and respect, will be some kind of fear for you, that you speak in this way, you write in this way. What space is available to you, Gideon?
Look, I'm privileged enough to be a Jewish journalist in Israel. And that's a privilege in Israel, because being Jewish and being Israeli means that I am a privileged part of the society. And therefore, there were times in which I even, as you remember, had bodyguards, but it's not the case now. I feel very secure. I feel very free to raise my voice. Not that there are many platforms where I can do it, but in my newspaper, for example, in Haaretz, I have a total freedom and support, not only freedom, but also support to raise my voice. But, it is such a lonely voice that it's almost meaningless.
God bless you, Gideon Levy, and thank you again for your peerless wisdom here on the mother of all talk shows. Extraordinary interview that, I think. You can let me know what you thought of what Gideon Levy had to say. You can now phone us free, I think, on, is it the old number, Chris? Which is here. Okay. 009 7250. That's a mobile number. 0808 9655 22. In the US, it's +1. They're on the screen now, thank goodness. You can phone us entirely free, wherever you are, in the US or the UK. And we'll be taking your calls throughout the evening. Let me go on to our next guest, who is Nour Alshaer, a student based in Gaza. She studies medicine in the United States, but took 1 year off to go back home. I don't know if she is bitterly regretting that decision, but she's currently in Gaza, and we'd like to talk with her. Nour, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. I hope we can safely conduct this interview and that you will not in any way be harmed or stopped from talking with us. We've been speaking for the last 35 minutes about the horror of life in Gaza, but let's hear it from you. Tell us exactly the situation that your people are now facing.
So basically, what's happening right now on homes level, we're trapped in our houses. We could not leave our houses for the past 6 days. And we obviously, as you mentioned earlier in the show, we do not have any bomb shelters whatsoever. So the safest place we can think of is our own houses, which are not safe, to be honest, because we are expecting to be, like, we expecting all our houses to be bombed literally at any second. The nighttime is actually usually the scariest time, which is currently. We can hear the drones currently and F-16s roaming around the skies. And we are all like, especially during the nighttime, all saying our last prayers and asking everyone for forgiveness, because we believe that we might just not pass it through the night. Every single night, there is a massacre that happens. Also during the day, massacres happen. One happened actually in my own neighborhood in the first day of Eid, where we actually were supposed to celebrate Eid, but it was actually celebrated with the death of my family members in my neighborhood. They bombed 2 houses, no warning whatsoever. I had to lose a cousin in one of them with her own child. She was a pregnant cousin with her own child. And then the other family, we lost 5 people. And one of the casualties is my other cousin who's still in the ICU currently. So it is not safe in the Gaza Strip. Nobody is safe in the Gaza Strip, and that's what's happening in here. And I just find it blows my mind how people just keep thinking of what's happening as some sort of a 2-state conflict or war. It is not. This is an unarmed population attacked by a state that has one of the greatest militaries in the world, and people have got to see that there is a difference in what's happening. And actually, if there are 2 equal sides, that would definitely not be the Gaza Strip and Israel, but the 2 equal sides would be all the people and governments supporting Israel for all the attacks they're doing under the guise of self-defense. That would actually be the equivalent of them supporting the killing of my family and the killing of my people. And everybody should be aware of that.
Now, as I said in the introduction, you are studying medicine in the United States. You came home and are now trapped with everyone else there. What's your feeling about the fact that none of this could be happening if it were not for the endless financial and military subvention of the United States?
Exactly. I condemn all the actions done by the American government, supporting and funding, deliberately funding all of this through the tax money of the American citizens. $3.8 billion of their tax money comes to fund the Israeli military every single year. Some people know about it, some people do not, but I need people to understand that without that money, maybe I wouldn't have to lose my, maybe I would have stayed safe.
Can you still hear me, Nour?
My connection is not very stable. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but no longer see you, unfortunately. But let's keep talking if it's safe for you to do so. Not that you would know if it was safe for you to do so until it was too late to know about it. If you can still hear me, Nour.
Yes.
We had a little girl on at the beginning of the show. Essentially, she was asking, what is this Eid of which you speak? What is this celebration of which you speak? We have no Eid. We have no celebration. Our celebrations are funerals of the whole families that were wiped out yesterday or in the last hours. What's your feeling about the 1 billion Muslims around the world, many of whose people have hearts that are breaking, but also have leaders whose tongues have been stolen and whose hands have been apparently amputated, such that they can do nothing or will do nothing to come to the aid of the Palestinians. Tell us about Eid in Gaza 2021.
Right. Eid is definitely just full of funerals that we're not even privileged enough to give. We're not privileged enough to give people funerals they deserve, because we're not even allowed to leave our family, our houses, and go give them those funerals. And absolutely, we do feel the support of the Muslims and Arabs from around the world, the people. We do feel their support and we appreciate their support. But we also realize and we feel betrayed by all the Arab and Muslim leaders who decided to sign normalization contracts and not help their brothers and sisters in the Gaza Strip and Palestine, and not even speak to what is happening. We feel very betrayed by that.
Now, long before you were born, I used to travel regularly and extensively in your part of the world. I was a comrade of the late President Arafat. Hamas did not exist. They literally did not exist. The Palestinian resistance was Mr. Arafat and people to his left, not to his right. The Islamist phenomenon of Hamas and other organizations like them did not exist. And I used to regularly say, you need to make a settlement with Arafat, because after Arafat comes people, it will be much less possible to achieve a settlement with. I'm guessing that just like under the Blitz here in Britain in the Second World War, the population that was being bombed swung behind their own government. Is that what's happening in Gaza also?
I mean, yes, but at the same time, this is a blockaded strip that has been blockaded for a lot of years now. So yes, of course, you would expect such groups rising under the name of resistance. But again, like, not talking about what Hamas is doing for resistance. Honestly, all types of resistance that we've been trying to do as Palestinians since before Hamas ever existed was always called for as terrorism. Even when we did, resistance through BDS movements, completely peacefully, we were called anti-Semitic groups. So the resistance of the Palestinian people, regardless of what groups are holding them or are representing them, have always been called either anti-Semitic or terrorist. And we only see one explanation of that, and this is deciding to take the side of a colonial state against a population.
Are you going to return to the United States if, God willing, you survive this and are able to?
I might, to finish school. I haven't really decided about that because I also joined medical school in here. So we'll see. I might, if God willing, I survive this war, I might either finish medical school here or there.
And tell us about the medical services now. I made the point earlier that even in normal times, if there are anything that can be described as normal times, even when the bombs and the missiles are not raining down, we have hospitals whose electricity goes off, whose medicine is therefore spoiled. We have doctors that are overworked to the point of exhaustion and beyond exhaustion. Heaven knows what the situation is now under this carnage. Tell us about the hospitals. Tell us about the medical staff.
Absolutely. We have very, very, very limited resources in our hospitals. We have very few hospitals. Actually, in my own city, we do not have a hospital whatsoever. We don't have one. We have very few hospitals, some of which were actually even bombed in last wars. And then others, such as Al Shifa Hospital, the biggest hospital in the whole Gaza Strip, Israel bombed the streets towards the hospital. So like we don't even have resources or equipment that are good enough to save the lives. But then at the same time, Israel is bombing the streets leading to those hospitals, making it even harder for people to get into those hospitals. With also very limited resources, we don't have any treatment for cancer. And that's why this is my dream of becoming an oncologist in the future, because whenever somebody needs any sort of treatment for cancer, they have to leave the strip because we do not have any treatment inside the strip. And this depends on the mercy of the Israeli government if they would let them go to hospitals in the West Bank. And they might allow them, like children, little children without their parents, not even their mothers. So this is really cruel. And this is why, like, this is where the passion of me wanting to become an oncologist came from. And if you ask any person in the Gaza Strip, these are the types of careers that people want to have. They just want to build a life that's kind of, I don't know, habitable, and just making us able to survive and have our basic human rights inside the strip if we stay safe inside a blockaded Gaza Strip. So we are people who actually do want to live. We are people who want to make our dreams come true. We are people who want to help the people in the strip, but then wars like these come and just kill all these dreams, kill all the people. I actually lost a classmate in the dental school yesterday to, like, you know, the bombings of yesterday. Like, there was a massacre in Gaza City downtown. They bombed 5 houses, and they were looking for people from under the rubble since yesterday, since last night, and they're still looking for more people. And the Egyptian government actually asked the Israeli government for, you know, a ceasefire for a few hours, just so that we can all, like, go and help pick up, you know, all the injuries and dead bodies, but they didn't allow that. And we obviously do not have equipment to actually get people from under the rubble. People literally use their own bare hands to pick up the rocks, you know, like, you know, all the neighbors and paramedics just come out to pick up all the bodies and help them. So maybe if we actually given a few hours so that everybody in the strip could have just gone and helped pick up, you know, injured people, maybe would have saved more, but they didn't allow us. So they're still looking for more until now. This has happened maybe like 18 hours ago. So of course the injured were going to die, you know.
Nour Alshaer, may God protect you. Thank you very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows from Gaza. Now, there's a poll. Who's to blame for the war in Gaza? A, Hamas, B, Netanyahu, C, the USA and Britain, the original author of that tragedy. You can vote on my Twitter feed. Now, amongst the bravest people I have ever met, Code Pink in the United States would definitely be up there. And amongst the bravest people in Code Pink is Ariel Gold, who is the national co-director of Code Pink. And if I'm lucky, she'll be joining me now from the United States. Ariel, thank you for joining us. Tell us, what's the atmosphere in the United States about what's happening? Is there anybody who knows? Anybody who cares?
Well, I'd say that we have two things going on simultaneously. On the one hand, we have President Biden and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken just towing the same old U.S. line. Israel has the right to defend itself. Israel is not overreacting. We stand behind Israel. In this case, it's hard to tell the difference between President Biden and the president right before him, Donald Trump. But on the other hand, we have really incredible, massive changes taking place. And the reason that they are taking place is thanks to the grassroots movement. It's thanks to people power. It's thanks to people showing up, organizing, collecting, connecting struggles, and getting people out to the ballot box. And what we're seeing as a result of that are massive changes in Congress. Just a few years ago, The P word in Congress, Palestine, was a giant no-no. And you would never hear members of Congress talking about Palestinian rights. And if you did, they were so few and far between and so isolated. Well, that's not the case right now. Yesterday, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, otherwise known as AOC, who is enormously popular in Congress as a progressive and is really pushing the Democratic Party. Yesterday, she tweeted, "Apartheid states are not democracies." Plain and clear and to the point. We also have Ilhan Omar, who is a champion for foreign policy. We have the first female woman champion Palestinian member of Congress, Rashida Tlaib, who was just on the floor of Congress in a special session talking about her Palestinian grandmother, her Siti. This is the first time that we've had a conversation taking place on the floor of Congress with multiple members talking about Palestinian rights. We even have war hawk, total war hawk and AIPAC lover, Senator Bob Menendez, who is the chairperson for the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, acknowledging what's happening in Gaza and stating concern for the children killed. He then went on to support Israel. But the fact that he felt that he had to acknowledge that is monumental. And so we need to keep this momentum growing. It has been growing. These progressive members of Congress, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, they're referred to as the squad. And the squad is growing. In the last election, we saw new members elected to the squad. So we're seeing this change from the bottom up. And while it hasn't reached the Biden administration yet, it is beginning this trend that is really exciting and hopeful.
And what about the media, Ariel? Are you making any kind of impact on the big networks? Are they showing any difference from previous attacks on Gaza?
I would say it's a lot of the same. We have the basic, what we've always seen. Israel is defending itself, lots of talk about the rockets coming out of Gaza, but very little talk about the Israeli airstrikes and the children and babies that are being killed. It's often framed as rockets from Gaza killed, this person in Israel, and then some Palestinians died without acknowledging, first of all, the disproportion, the gross disproportion. But that is shifting slightly too. It's slow, I'd say, but it's shifting slightly. We have seen Palestinian voices on mainstream media, like Nour Alshaer. We've seen people from Sheikh Jarrah on CNN. So there is a gradual small shift taking place, and it's our job as activists, as movement builders, and as American citizens to show up and see that these changes build on each other and start to move more quickly.
Now, you sound like you're at a rally, but then you always are at rallies. You are perpetual motion. Where are you and what are you doing right now?
Well, I'm in my hometown of Ithaca, New York. It's about 4.5 hours north of New York City, a small college town. And I've been here during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I am out at a rally today. I'm out at a rally with my daughter. She's 18 years old and just getting ready for university. She'll be going to the University of Pittsburgh. And she was one of the speakers today at the rally for Palestine here in our hometown. And this was such a proud moment for me because it's the young generation who are going to be bringing these new changes and building the momentum. And we're seeing this across the country and across the world and, of course, on the ground in Palestine.
God bless you all. Thank you very much, Ariel Gold, for joining us. And may everyone support Code Pink in the United States and around the world. Now, Yousef Alhelou ought to be on the line. I first met him in Gaza, but he's in exile now. But he is the head of Gaza TV News. Yousef, are you there?
George.
Yousef, welcome to this packed show. I apologize for keeping you waiting. You have seen, as we all did, the destruction of the television tower containing Western journalists and outfits like Associated Press, for which I myself have worked for a long time. Why is Israel targeting the media, do you think?
Well, thank you first for having me. As you may know, George, Israel justifies its attacks using excessive force against residential targets, civilian targets, including those media offices, claiming that some fighters might have been taken shelter or they might be housing Hamas facilities or intelligence offices. But the journalists who were evacuated, who work at that tower for many years, they denied any activities for Palestinian resistance movements. But as a matter of fact, the journalists, they agree that Israel wants to silence the Palestinian voices. It's a media censorship because reporting from the ground, exposing Israeli crimes, obviously that embarrasses Israel. And to document the bombardment of that tower live on air, that was kind of very annoying to the Israelis. And they literally, intentionally targeting that tower because it houses Al Jazeera, Associated Press, the two major international media outlets. They will tell you that they will not be silenced. Journalists will continue their work. The stories will be told, and nothing will deter them from continuing their media work.
So it will have failed in that case. And with technology now, you don't need to be in a tower. You can broadcast from a van. If necessary, you can broadcast from a dish in your own hand. So Israel brought all this international opprobrium, the International Federation of Journalists, the National Union of Journalists here in Britain. People are outraged at the destruction of television stations because the clear intent is to deprive the rest of us from seeing what's actually happening there. But it's futile, isn't it?
It is indeed. You cannot block the transmission of satellite signals. Everybody is a citizen journalist nowadays in Gaza. They use smartphones. With the rise of the internet and social media, stories are being told from the ground instantly without editorial policies. Of course, it's a total failure on part of the Israeli government because they can tell, they know for sure that Palestinian journalists, although they are not deterred, they will never be silenced. We've lost already a female journalist colleague. The Israeli government keeps justifying its attacks, killing civilians. So far, 197 Palestinians, mainly civilians, including 54 children, have been killed, in addition to over 1,200 people. And flattening these high towers, destroying the infrastructure without warning even. Many families were killed inside their homes without warning. At the beginning of the offensive a few days ago, the Israeli intelligence was giving ultimatum 5-10 minutes for people to evacuate. But now they just knock the houses while people are inside. So obviously the Israeli government tries to achieve a quick victory at the expense of the suffering of the Palestinian people. The ongoing atrocities and aggression against the Palestinians, obviously, it is ongoing because of the because of the silence of the international community. We know that Israel enjoys a culture of impunity. It has a green light to go on. And the condemnation, it's empty talk. It's not going to stop Israel until Israel is held to an account.
Yousef Alhelou, thank you for joining us all too briefly on the mother of all talk shows. We'll be taking your calls, of course. The numbers are, I've got them now, 448081 965 522. If you're in the UK, you can ring that number absolutely free. And if you're in the US, it's +1 844 944 3344. Again, absolutely free to join us here in this global mother of all talk shows. But it's time for the news with Jamie Lowe.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
At least 42 people have been killed by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza in the deadliest single attack since the start of heavy fighting. Rescuers raced to pull survivors and bodies from the rubble of 3 flattened buildings after the attack in Gaza City, which also left 50 wounded. Gaza health officials said 10 women and 8 children were among those killed, bringing the number who have died in Gaza to 181, including 52 children. 10 people, including 2 children, have been killed in Israel. The Israeli military says it's bombed the home of the political leader of the Palestinian group Hamas in a new wave of airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. It released a video of an exploding bomb, which it said had hit the home of Yahya Sinwar, the group's overall leader in the territory. He is believed to be in hiding. Medical group MSF said that one of its clinics was among the sites damaged by overnight Israeli aerial bombardment. As hostilities stretched into a 7th day, rockets were fired into Israel, and both Israel and Hamas insisted they would continue their cross-border fire dispute. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres reminding all sides that, quote, indiscriminate targeting of civilian and media structures violates international law. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to, quote, continue to respond forcefully to rocket attacks. Israel says it's recorded nearly 3,000 rocket launches since Monday. The UN Security Council is due to discuss the situation later today. The UK has increasing confidence that COVID-19 vaccinations work against the Indian variant of the virus, the Health Secretary has said. Scientists believe that the variant is more transmissible, and cases of it nearly tripled to 1,313 in the past week in England. However, Matt Hancock said early lab data showed vaccines remained effective. He said the majority of those in hospital in Bolton, a hotspot for the Indian variant, were unvaccinated. The Health Secretary said the variant was, quote, relatively widespread in small numbers in most of the country. It comes as England is due to move to stage 3 of the government's roadmap for easing lockdown on Monday, with socialising in groups of 6 indoors as well as some international travel to be allowed. On Friday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned the variant could pose, quote, serious disruption to the final stage of lockdown easing in England on June the 21st. Matt Hancock has defended his role in helping a former Conservative minister to try to secure a PPE deal at the start of the pandemic. The Sunday Times newspaper reported he personally intervened to help Brooks Newmark in getting the £180 million deal. Hancock told the BBC's Andrew Marr show it was perfectly reasonable for him to send an email when the country needed medical equipment. The newspaper published a series of emails between Hancock and Newmark, the former civil society minister, who resigned in 2014 after sending sexually explicit photographs of himself to an undercover journalist. The paper reported that in May 2020, Newmark teamed up with the owner of a dog food company who'd set up a firm, Life Partners, to broker PPE deals for international supplies. It said Newmark first emailed the Health Secretary on the 27th of May last year detailing a proposal explaining he had links to well-connected and powerful people in China, but that he needed government help in accelerating deals. The newspaper said the Department of Health awarded a £178 million contract for protective goggles to the firm on the 1st of June. One of the most vaccinated countries in the world is experiencing a COVID-19 outbreak. While other nations struggle to secure enough vaccines, the Seychelles is in the enviable position of having already fully immunised more than 61.4% of its population. But that hasn't been enough to stop the spread of COVID. Over the past month, case numbers have been rising in the Indian Ocean archipelago, prompting authorities to impose restrictions in the country of 98,000 people. Data released on Thursday shows that there are more than 2,700 active cases. Of the current active cases, 33% have been fully vaccinated. Experts and local officials, however, say the Seychelles outbreak isn't a sign that the vaccines aren't working. Police Scotland has said many more arrests will follow what it described as disgraceful scenes as Rangers fans celebrated in Glasgow city centre. 3 police officers were injured and 20 people arrested as crowds were dispersed due to rising disorder. Thousands of fans had taken to the streets after the Rangers' first Scottish Premiership title win in a decade. Police broke up the crowds after about 5 hours due to rising disorder, with one officer suffering a serious facial injury. Myanmar's military has entered a small town in western Chin state which took up arms against them 3 weeks ago. Activists from the volunteer Chinland Defence Force say they have retreated from Mindat to spare the town further bombardment. Mindat is one of several towns where opponents of the military have armed themselves. For 3 weeks, they have been fighting against local people, armed mainly with homemade hunting guns. And dozens of soldiers are reported to have been killed. The rebels said 6 of their fighters had died. Nearly 800 people have died in mainly unarmed protests at February's coup, which ousted the elected government. And finally, it's a tale of 2 tigers. The first, Ratna, a 17-year-old Sumatran tiger which lives at the Sherpeth Wildlife Park near Cambridge in England, has had its eye saved in what's believed to be the first ever operation in its type in the world on a big cat. Staff noticed her left eye, which had previously had a cataract removed, was deteriorating, and a corneal ulcer was diagnosed by a specialist eye vet. Surgeon Dr. David Williams from the Queen's Veterinary School Hospital at the University of Cambridge said after 2 months of careful monitoring, he was delighted to be able to sign Ratna off as fully healed. And in Houston, Texas, a young tiger was spotted roaming around before it was captured. India, a 9-month-old tiger, had been spotted last Sunday in the west of the city and was nearly shot by an off-duty deputy. Commander Ron Borza said it was not clear where the tiger had been in the week since the sighting, but the owner, whose name he gave as Gia, had brought the animal to police. Borza said Gia was not yet facing any criminal charges, but he confirmed that keeping an animal such as a tiger within the city boundaries is illegal. And that's your latest here on Sputnik News. I'm Jerry Lowe.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Well, as you'd expect, the poll is going like a train. 4,169 votes in so far. And here's the result so far. Who's to blame for the war in Gaza? A. Hamas, 36%. B. Netanyahu, 38%. C. The US and Britain, 26%. You can vote on my Twitter feed. Now, it is 16 years ago exactly, I know it doesn't seem possible, that I was suddenly aware that a committee in the United States Senate had found me guilty of receiving millions of dollars from the Iraqi government, as was of Saddam Hussein. They found me guilty without a single telephone call to to tell me my trial was happening, without a single letter, even though I was a member of Parliament at the time, I remind you. Not a single email. Emails existed even back then. Without any communication whatsoever. I was suddenly informed that I'd been on trial by the US Senate and had been found guilty. I immediately, through diplomatic channels and by public proclamation, demanded the right to be heard by the people who'd found me guilty, albeit after they had found me guilty. And pausing only to collect my toothbrush, I set sail for the United States of America. And what has been, so far at least, my finest hour. It has been watched by uncountable numbers of millions of people all over the world. Indeed, it was watched live on television in many countries in the world, including our own. It must have seemed like a good idea at the time for the accusers. But it didn't take long for those accusers to wish that they had not tangled with me, or at least not allowed me to defend myself, albeit belatedly, because, as I said many times over the years, and I'm often asked, indeed some people pay me money now to talk them through what happened that day in the US Senate, business people, for their middle managers courses and so on. I was a boxer when I was young, and I always knew the moment when my opponent no longer wished to be there. A light would die in their eyes and a wish that the towel might come flying in. I should say I myself have been on the receiving end of that kind of beating several times also. But I knew it when I saw it in the eyes of the Senator Norman Coleman, ex-Senator Norman Coleman, very quickly in the course of these proceedings. I could see that he, as a high-flying politician that day, at least that was how he started that day, a man who wanted to be the Republican Party's nominee for president of the United States after George W. Bush, he ended that session a very diminished political figure. But I saw quite quickly in his eyes a feeling of whose idea was this? I think, in the words of George W. Bush, we could say that they misunderestimated me. For me, some people thought I was brave to go there. Some people thought I was foolish to go there. But I had absolutely nothing to be afraid of. I was brimming with the truth. And I think that showed in the performance. Without notes, without cue cards, without teleprompters or auto cues, just sheer brimming truth. Take a look at the video and then I'll show you something you've never seen before. Indeed, even I hadn't seen it before. This is me at the US Senate this week, 16 years ago.
Is a proven fact. It's a proven fact that these forged documents existed and were being circulated amongst right-wing newspapers in Baghdad and around the world in the immediate aftermath of the fall of the Iraqi regime. Now, Senator, I gave my heart and soul to oppose the policy that you promoted. I gave my political life's blood to try to stop the mass killing of Iraqis by the sanctions on Iraq, which killed 1 million Iraqis, most of them children. Most of them died before they even knew that they were Iraqis, but they died for no other reason other than that they were Iraqis, with the misfortune to be born at that time. I gave my heart and soul to stop you committing the disaster that you did commit in invading Iraq. And I told the world that your case for the war was a pack of lies. I told the world that Iraq, contrary to your claims, did not have weapons of mass destruction. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that Iraq had no connection to Al-Qaeda. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that Iraq had no connection to the atrocity on 9/11/2001. I told the world, contrary to your claims, that the Iraqi people would resist a British and American invasion of their country, and that the fall of Baghdad would not be the beginning of the end, but merely the end of the beginning. Senator, in everything I said about Iraq, I turned out to be right, and you turned out to be wrong. And 100,000 people have paid with their lives. 1,600 of them American soldiers, sent to their deaths on a pack of lies. 15,000 of them wounded, many of them disabled forever, on a pack of lies.
Now, you may have seen, the eagle-eyed amongst you, the celebrated filmmaker Julian Cole behind me. You may have seen his camera, the red light, showing you that the camera was rolling. Not many people were aware that Julian had been with me from that very morning, from the media frenzy outside my then apartment in Cheshire Street in London's East End, where I was the Member of Parliament for Bethnal Green and Bow. He was with me through the airport, on the aeroplane, in the slum hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. Don't be confused. It wasn't the posh end of Pennsylvania Avenue. It was the utterly impoverished, rat-infested end, where the owner of the hotel told us that although there was a shop across the road, it was not safe to go over to buy anything. A slum hotel where when I tried to flush the toilet overflowed with the effluence of centuries, it appeared. Never stopped. Imagine, it was a metaphor, a never-ending stream of other people's effluent from years gone by, poured across the bathroom floor and across the bedroom floor, and driving me in the end out of the door of the hotel room. I don't know if Julian filmed that sea of excrement. If he did, it wouldn't be nice to show it to you anyway. But here is some of the never-before-seen footage, shot by Julian Cole, edited by him. And we'll be talking to the man himself very, very shortly. Let's take a quick look at the behind-the-scenes of my trip to Washington.
The late Enoch Powell once said that one should never enter the House of Commons chamber without at least 2 verbal hand grenades ready to throw. I can assure you I have at least 2 verbal hand grenades ready to throw tomorrow in front of the Senate.
Galloway, welcome to the land of the free.
Thank you very much.
What are you hoping to say to the committee here? What are you going to say?
Hang on. Well, I've got a number of, I think, powerful complaints to make about process and about the content of the schoolboy dossier which they passed off as an investigation. If I were you, I'd get a ringside seat tomorrow. I think it'll be quite an important parliamentary occasion. I really feel that, to coin a phrase from the Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968, the whole world is watching. And I think that's a good place to be, because we have a lot to say, and we don't often get the chance to say it live on television.
George, are you feeling nervous at all?
Not at all.
Excited?
I never feel nervous. No, not excited either. I'm just absolutely determined. As I've told you many times in this epic, calamity has hardened me and turned my mind to steel. It's a dictatorship, as you very well know, Mr. Hitchens, because I used to talk to you in Palestine when they were
dictating to the occupied Palestinian people. General Ariel Sharon is a dictator for the Palestinian people that he occupies.
And the martyrs of the Palestinians, the suicide bombers, the martyrs as you call them, who Saddam Hussein paid for. You praised Saddam Hussein for paying for the suicide bombers, Mr. Galloway.
I have a question about...
Well, I'm sorry, isn't that a question? Who are you? I have a question before the meeting. Yeah, keep a civil tongue. I have a question before the meeting.
This is a drink-soaked former Trotskyite, British.
Now you see?
Popinjay.
Now you see?
I've no more to say to him, so please.
Well, of course, Saddam Hussein or anybody else in Iraq never paid me one thin dime. But the media outfits that alleged that he had to pay me millions. In one case, the Daily Telegraph alone, their allegations to that effect cost them £2.3 million in damages. Alas, most of it went to the lawyers. Very little of it went to me, and none of it went to the man who took these extraordinary films. As I say, he's from the East End of London. I haven't seen him for many years, but he is one of the best filmmakers that I have ever come across. I hope he joins me now. He is, of course, Julian Cole. Julian, it's very nice to see you again. You're looking well, I must say.
To connect with you again, George.
Yes, it is wonderful.
Been a long time.
Indeed, and looking at the footage, I think both of us are looking better now than we were then. I don't know what that says. Just tell us how you found yourself in the hot seat with me.
Well, I've been filming you. First of all, George, I just want to say it's great to be remembering good, happier past times in this terrible time we're in at the moment. So I just want to say, my hearts and solidarity for the people in Gaza right now. And
yes,
although
indeed.
it's great to be remembering these good old days. I should just make that point to begin with. But yeah, I started filming you in your incredible election campaign here in East London some months before that, and your extraordinary victory, historic victory here in the constituency of Bow and Bethnal Green, as it was known in those days. And I was just 10 days, I think, after your great victory that you were suddenly there in front of the Senate committee. And it always struck me as being a quite extraordinary coincidence that this Senate committee report just sort of suddenly appeared at the very moment that you'd just been elected. I was no stranger, having followed you around on that amazing election campaign, to your oratory skills, but I had no idea of what you were going to do in front of the Senate. It was really an extraordinary occasion, and as you were saying earlier, you had no notes in front of you, and I was just astounded at your oratory skills, and you just flattened them. All of those senators lined up in front of you like kind of guilty schoolboys hauled up in front of the headmaster or something. They didn't know where to look or what to say.
Thank you, Julian. Kind of you to say so. Do you recall the slum hotel that I recall now so colourfully?
I do indeed. I managed to avoid the effluence. I think I didn't actually... I don't have footage of that, I'm afraid, George. But
thank God for that.
I do, and I mean, I sort of travelled in the States quite a lot prior to that, although never been to Washington. And I have to say, it sort of, the scales kind of dropped from my eyes, really, in terms of being there in the capital of this.
Empire. It's the heart of the empire.
The heart of the empire, exactly. And the concierge in the hotel telling me that I couldn't walk across the street to buy a packet of cigarettes. In fact, I did, and I went into the shop, and it was there was a kind of perspex screen, and he handed me the cigarettes through the little hole, and I handed through the money, and I just thought, what kind of nation is this where it's not even safe to walk the streets of the capital city?
I remember the shop. It was Fort Apache, really, iron bars and perspex screens and so on. And obviously, we must have got in a taxi because you were filming in the taxi. When we arrived there, of course, the world's press were assembling, and the now deceased figure of Christopher Hitchens was first up. In a sense, I warmed up on him. He was like my punch bag to warm up before going in to meet his masters. For those of us who remember the great days of Christopher Hitchens, it's quite extraordinary to see him fallen amongst the Bushites and the supporters of a war that now has no friends anywhere in the world.
Yes. Well, the pugilistic analogies were flying, and I think it was certainly a good few kind of sparring rounds to warm you up, wasn't it? For the
it turned out that way, yeah. For
the big fight, and I think it was a CNN reporter afterwards said something about his kind of verdict was Galloway by a knockout before round 5, I think was his conclusion of...
I thought that that's a good one, but the best headline was, as the best headlines often are, I'm afraid, in the New York Post, which said, Brit fries senators in oil.
Yeah, that was amazing.
That was priceless, that one.
From a Murdoch-owned newspaper, that was
exactly
quite something.
Now, Julian, what are we going to... Shouldn't we make a movie maybe for the 20th anniversary, or are you waiting, hoping I'm going to pass before you and you'll get a bigger price? Why are we only seeing this footage now?
No, certainly not. Well, it has a long and sort of checkered history, this film. It was originally commissioned after in fact it was just after your appearance in front of the Senate that the BBC finally got around to making a decision about whether they wanted to commission the movie, and of course after your performance there in front of that Senate committee, they decided yes, they definitely had to commission the film, but then proceeded to renege on our agreement and sort of bully and coerce me into making a film which was basically would was not the film that I was intending to make, and so I had to tell them no way and walked away from it. And if there's any budding documentary editors out there that want to get their teeth into a feature documentary, get in touch.
Definitely. Julian, are you still in the film game? I know you had a hotel and enjoyed and prospered at that. Are you still making movies?
I am on a small scale, George. Yes, still in there, still working away.
So people can follow you, I think, on Twitter. I hadn't realized you were on Twitter. So what's your Twitter handle?
Julian P. Cole.
Julian P. Cole. Everyone should follow Julian, a remarkable man, a remarkable filmmaker, and shared with me and the editor of this very show, Ron Mackay, one of the most remarkable days in recent, anyway, British political history. Julian, thank you. God bless you. I remember our time together always and forever.
Me too.
Julian Cole, who took that and much more remarkable footage. How's the poll? My goodness, 5,000 people have voted on the poll. That's a record, surely, Chris. Hamas are blamed by 36% of you. Netanyahu is blamed by 39% of you. And the US and Britain are blamed by 25% of you. The Telegram poll, though, as sometimes is the case, is very different. That's the Twitter poll. The Telegram poll is this. 17% of you blame Hamas, 37% blame Netanyahu, but a staggering 46% blame the US and the United Kingdom. We've got a call on Gaza from Rose in Philadelphia. Who could resist it? Rose, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, a little echoey, but I can hear you, yes.
Sorry, yes. Well,
that's better.
I don't even know where to start. I'd like to begin by condemning the state of Israel for its murder, for its genocide, for its theft. And I would also like to condemn everybody complicit, not only the West, who are, of course, the very first supporters of Israel, but the other Arab leaders who have joined them. And they all deserve a great punishment someday, probably. And of course, Eid Mubarak to everybody watching, although it is not Eid Mubarak to the children of Gaza, as you described, as we saw with the video of the young child, the girl, in Gaza, and all the other.
It was quite heartbreaking, her testimony. I have met girls like that before at the end of previous savage bombardments, even more savage actually than this one so far has been, in which many, many thousands of people died. There's a staggering percentage of the dead that were children on this occasion, indeed on all occasions. Fully 1/3 of the people who've been killed in the last 6 days are children. And yet it's still possible to find people who blame the victims rather than the perpetrators. Is it true in Philadelphia also?
Yes, 100%. Although we did have a big demonstration in Philadelphia yesterday that I am proud to have attended. And yes, the children of Gaza are seen as less worthy than the children of Israel.
Children of a lesser
their blood
God.
is cheaper.
Children of a lesser God, whose blood is less precious than others.
Absolutely. And also, it's in. I just want to talk about some other Palestinian protests going on around the world, even as far as Romania and Serbia, although in France they have been violently suppressed, and in Italy, although they have gone forward. Last week, the members of the Italian government got on this big fancy podium in Rome to show solidarity with Israel and for quote-unquote peace in Jerusalem. Well, they shouldn't be standing on a podium in Rome. They should be on their hands and knees in Gaza before the Palestinian mothers, fathers, widows, orphans, and beg for their forgiveness, although they wouldn't deserve it. But they should be on their knees before them.
I asked the medical student, Nour, let me ask you also, Rose.
Sure.
One of the reasons why this subject has always occupied a special place in my work is because the United Kingdom is the author of this disaster for the reasons I adumbrated earlier. But one of the reasons why it should be a matter of great importance in the United States is that now none of this could happen without the taxes, billions of dollars worth of taxes of the United States government and the endless diplomatic and political protection afforded by successive United States governments. How do you feel about that, and how do you think Americans are feeling about it? Is there a change in the air, as Ariel Gold implied earlier?
There is definitely a change, I would say. There's definitely been a solidarity between, among all the groups who fight for justice, of all the groups of people who have been violently impacted by the imperialist way that the U.S. government and the Western European governments act, in that they loot, they murder people, they steal their lives, their futures, their dreams, and they do it because they want to loot the treasures of their land in Palestine the Holy Land, the number one holiest site on earth. It's dirt is the most blessed thing you can touch, that of the Holy Land. And that's why they want it. And it was the same reason that they went to Africa or Asia to steal from those people and to this day punish their descendants. That's what we see going on.
Rose in Philadelphia, a very, very powerful call. Thank you very much for making it. Let me give out the numbers again. If you're in the UK and it's entirely free, it's 44-8081-965-522. And if you're in the US, it's +1-844-944-3344. Toll free, as they say in the United States. Absolutely free, as we say here in the United Kingdom. Dan says, 5 years ago today, Fusilier Lee Rigby was laid to rest. His name must never be forgotten. Indeed, I mentioned it earlier. For those who have forgotten or never knew, Lee Rigby was a Fusilier, a drummer boy, a young soldier who was driven down in the streets of South London in broad daylight, and I don't want to go into too many details, but butchered in plain sight by two Islamist fanatic extremists who blamed the war on Iraq, but in fact their hearts were filled with evil, and the evil murder of Lee Rigby should never be forgotten. Odnam says, we have a problem on Facebook, Instagram, and even YouTube. All news or videos regarding Palestine are automatically deleted. Some are edited and muted. And Shams says, all the streets leading to Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza have been bombed. And Al-Shifa Hospital is the largest and most important medical center in Gaza. Ambulances cannot leave or enter it. This is a war crime. Indeed, one of many such war crimes. And Muds says, I'm not going to read the first part, God bless you, George Galloway, for shedding light and defending the oppressed. And Michael says, we need to let the American taxpayers know that their money is used to kill children and innocent people. James says, Netanyahu could stop it if he wanted. Over the years, he has had enough political experience to understand the situation. Yet his tactics are always the same, even though he knows they will not work. He must just hate Palestinians. And David says, how does apportioning blame stop the deaths? How does apportioning blame help resolve anything? Give me a call, David. I'd love to hear your argument. You know the numbers. They're there on the screen. I do hope you'll call. Adnan says banks are to blame. Without banks, nobody would have money to buy weapons. And much, much more where that came from. But we have another call from Sais in California on the subject of Gaza. Sais, welcome to the show. Say your piece, my friend.
It's a pleasure being on the show. Can you hear me all right?
Very clearly, thank you.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of yours. I've been watching you for a long time, and I know you brought up this, that you've visited Gaza when you were, an MP.
Many times, yeah.
So my question to you was, what do you think is a resolution for this conflict that's been going on for 60, 70 years since Israel was formed, based on the United Nations and Britain? So is there a concrete resolution where lives can still be saved and not lost merely on the basis of, fighting for land and I believe partly religion? So what is your resolution?
First of all, I don't think it is really religion. It's about the land. It's about control and suzerainty over it. The solution will have to be found by the peoples of Israel and Palestine. No one else can justifiably prescribe those. I'm more concerned right now, this minute, in getting a ceasefire, not because a ceasefire will solve the problem, it will only erupt later again, but I want to stop the slaughter of children of the same age as my own. I want to stop the blood from flowing, and I want people urgently then to begin the discussion you're asking me to have. I spent the best years of my life as a comrade of President Arafat, God rest his soul. He persuaded me that the Oslo Agreement, the two-state solution, was the way to go. But 30 years on, more than, the Oslo Agreement is utterly bereft and destroyed. The land that the Palestinian state was to be created on has all gone. Virtually every square mile of it has gone. It has been paved over with illegal settlements and illegal highways, changing the demography and topography of the occupied territories. Absolutely illegal under international law. You are expressly forbidden not to, you are forbidden from bringing in settlers into occupied land that has been seized in war. It's there in very large letters. It's completely illegal to bring settlers in to territory that is militarily occupied. It's absolutely illegal to change the topography of the area by building so-called settlements, which are in fact large towns, glittering and beautiful, but disfiguring the land that has been stolen. So the two-state solution is dead. My own view, it's not the view of RT, it's not the view of Sputnik, it's not the view of anybody except me, but as you ask me, is that now the only solution is for one state of Israel-Palestine, Israel-Palestine, where Jews, Muslims, and Christians live as equal citizens under the law, a law which would have to guarantee the religious freedoms and character of the three monotheistic faiths which live there. I'm not amongst those who calls for, it would be preposterous and ridiculous anyway, but I don't call for it, I don't believe in it, for the Israelis to go home. First of all, the territory they're in is their home. They were born there and they have acquired national rights by having been born there. They are not people who've just arrived that can go back somewhere. I'm not amongst those who advocates that. And neither is there any possibility of that happening. So I believe that the best solution would be to give the vote to the millions of Palestinians who are living under Israeli rule and have been living under Israeli rule from 1967. If you have millions of people living under your law since 1967, but you do not give them a vote and equal rights with the others, then that's why you get called an apartheid state. There is no question. And Nelson Mandela said so. Archbishop Tutu said so. All of the experts about apartheid said so. That's why you get called an apartheid state. And no decent Israeli is comfortable with that appellation. But it is an absolute description of a society in which you have different rights, less rights than others living under that state because of who you are. In the case of South Africa, because you're black. In the case of Israel, because you are not an Israeli, but you are living endlessly all of your life and all of the life that you can possibly imagine into the future, you'll be living under Israeli law, Israeli force, but you have no vote and you have no equal rights. So that size is my view. You can take it or leave it, and others can weigh in on the numbers that are on the screen periodically. Size in California, thank you for your call. Let me take a break, and then we've got Bob Dylan at 80 with Bill Bradshaw, one of my favourite authors. Give me 60 seconds, won't you?
Radio Sputnik.
We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Want to know how international issues fit into local ones and how local issues fit into international ones? With the historical context to tie them together, we're bringing it to you all by any means necessary. Tune in weekdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to hear me, Jackie Lukman, alongside my co-host Sean Blackman. By any means necessary, your guide to connecting the social, political, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
Now, the poll is going like a train still. Well over 5,000 votes are in, but you can still vote on my Twitter feed. Now, there aren't many bigger fans of Bob Dylan than me, except perhaps my next guest. He, Bill Bradshaw, is a journalist and author, but he wrote a book, Bob Dylan at the Isle of Wight Festival, 1969, which caught my attention some time ago, and he was kind enough to appear on Sputnik with us to discuss that. Neither Bill nor I are remotely approaching 80 years old, but Bob Dylan is celebrating his 80th birthday. How has it happened? Bill Bradshaw, how did this young troubadour that we saw burst on the scene, already a legend, in the very early 1960s in New York City, how come he reached 80 and how come he's still going?
It can't be true, can it, George? Good evening, by the way. It can't be true. But, you know, one of his great songs is Forever Young. And Bob Dylan will be forever young, I think, for so many of us. And he's reaching the milestone on the 24th, I think it is. Lots of words already in the public prints and media about him. But I think the great thing about Bob Dylan at 80 is that he confounds that great age, George, because he is as relevant in many ways today as he was back in the mid-60s when something happened to him in the mid-60s that would lead him to the book that you mentioned that I wrote about, would lead him to Blighty, to England and the Isle of Wight, because he had a crash on his motorbike at a pretty critical time during his development as a major artist. He cracked a bone in his back, and he was already feeling pretty wretched about how he was being perceived by his critics because he'd gone electric. His band, The Hawks, which would become The Band, that's what they changed their name to, had changed the shape and the face of rock and roll. Without Bob Dylan and the band, there wouldn't have been probably Cream. The Beatles wouldn't have developed the way they developed. The Beach Boys wouldn't have developed the way they developed. And he decided to take time out. And believe it or not, George, and I know you're a student, so you will believe this, it was 8 years following his very last gig in 1966, which was in England at the Albert Hall. He then went home, had that motorcycle crash in July of 66. cancelled all his gigs, didn't play, or didn't go, let's put it this way, didn't go on another tour with the band for another 8 years. And the only interlude in that 8 barren years of live performances, by the way, he was, of course, recording tremendous stuff in that period.
Some of his best, yeah.
Some would say his very best, yeah. His only live appearance in that 8-year barren period was in England at the Isle of Wight. And that is pretty remarkable, really.
Well, it is. I mean, it's almost unbelievable, Bill. Of all the places, of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, he pitched up at the Isle of Wight. Has the place ever recovered?
I don't think it wants to recover now. At the time, it seemed it would never recover because the Isle of Wight Festival had actually been born the year before in 1968, a much smaller affair for the first one, when Jefferson Airplane were the big draw, one-day festival. But the 3 young brothers from the island, the Folk brothers, Ray, Ronnie, and Bill, decided to really stick their necks out. They knew nothing. They knew nothing. They had no money. They had no backing, really. But they decided to write to Bob Dylan at the time had 2 managers, Bert Bloch and Albert Grossman. They wrote to his management and said, look, how about this? Bob Dylan, come over here. We will give him a family holiday. We'll put him on this new, spanking brand new liner, the QE2. He can bring his wife and children. We'll put him in a luxury farmhouse. We just want him to come and play and have a good time and give us a really good draw. And something clicked there with both Dylan and his management. He rather liked that idea. And critically, he was well and truly brassed off with the rumblings of a big festival at Woodstock, which is where Bob Dylan lived. In the end, what was called the Woodstock Festival was staged about an hour's drive away at Bethel Woods, but they gave it the name Woodstock. Bob actually lived in Woodstock, and he did not like the idea that he was almost being forced to accept the invitation to come out and play at Woodstock. He valued his privacy, as you well know, George. Didn't fancy that at all. Didn't like the fact that young fans were getting into his house and breaking in, and he just wanted out of there. He said at the time, "I've had enough. I just want to get out of here. It's all bullshit, if you pardon my French." And so he accepted this extraordinary offer. And then the Folk brothers tied up the contract on July the 25th. They had 5 weeks, George. Can you imagine this? In the day before
social media,
before social media, any electronic transfers, everything was either cash or checks. They had 5 weeks to organise the Isle of Wight Festival. Bob Dylan, having agreed and signed his contract on the 25th of July, he was booked to play on August the 31st. Quite extraordinary. And somehow they pulled it off. And as I said, that was...
Talk about shooting for the moon. I mean, 3 brothers in the Isle of Wight think, let's invite Bob Dylan. I mean, it's the stuff of late night carousing, and in the morning you realise, actually, that wasn't such a good idea. And yet it became absolutely seminal in the history, not of just of the Isle of Wight, but of music festivals here in this country.
It set the bar. To put into context, the year before, on the first Island Festival with Jefferson Airplane, they had 10,000 fans there. There was Jefferson Airplane, The Move, Tyrannosaurus Rex, Fairport Convention, reasonable lineup.
Yeah.
The following year, with Bob Dylan and The Who and the Moody Blues and Free and this sort of lineup, but Dylan was the big draw. They had 150,000 people, George, and that was at a time when the island's population was about 125,000. There was a sort of a strap line that went round on some of the advertising, help Bob Dylan sink the Isle of Wight. With 150,000 people there, they pretty much did. And the great burghers of the Isle of Wight, the old Colonel Blimps and the establishment, they didn't know what had hit them. And Dylan and the Isle of Wight in '69 set the bar for everything that followed, Glastonbury and all the rest of it. But the following year, because it had been such a massive success with Dylan, the place blew apart when they invited Hendrix in 1970. And they were, if 150,000 was improbable, they had what's been described as or estimated a crowd between 400 and 600,000 for the 1970 Hendrix Festival. And of course, that led to the whole thing being put into hibernation for the next 30 years.
Unbelievable story, and brilliantly told in your book, which I reviewed at the time, which was Bob Dylan at the Isle of Wight Festival, 1969, just what it says on the tin. It's a remarkable story. Finally, Bill, Bob ain't finished yet. I've just, in the last couple of weeks, I've been playing his latest album. I almost said last, but it will never be safe to say last. But his latest album, particularly the epic track, which takes us through the history of the 1960s, and it reduced me to tears. It was powerful beyond words. At 80, he's still doing it, Bill.
That's what I said. It's absolutely right, George. He's still relevant. You're talking Rough and Rowdy Ways, the double album that came out just about this time last year, and it went straight into the Billboard chart at #2, George, and that says something about an octogenarian. I mean, it's quite remarkable that he's that relevant, and everybody, from Springsteen downwards, received this album with some rapture. They could not praise it enough, and it is a significant album, for a guy who was 79 when it came out, and he is still going, and he is still creating great songs, and he is the only artist to have had a top 40 charting album in 7 successive decades, which the album that you're just talking about put him into that.
Well, Bill, let's hope thee and me are still producing great work at the age of 80. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let's take a quick call before the news. Anne in Stafford in England on Gaza. Anne, welcome.
Hello, George.
Hi.
To some extent, I think people have already covered what I wanted to say, because you've done exactly what all of the other news outlets have done. You and your various guests are saying, oh no, all of this is Israel's fault. Other news outlets are saying, oh no, this is all the Palestinians' fault. But nobody's sitting there and saying, right, what are we going to do to stop this from happening again? Now, you said earlier, it's for the people in the area to, come to their own agreement. But if you think of a divorcing couple who hate each other now, and they're fighting like mad, reliving every battle, it takes a court to step in and say, stop it now, he's getting that, you're getting that. If someone doesn't step in and sort of create a settlement that everybody is going to not be happy with, but be able to live with, then we'll still be getting...
We did do that, of course, with the Oslo Agreement, and it was signed with great panoply on the White House lawn. But Israel never implemented it, so it never happened.
George, if I was to give you a magic wand now, not that I've got one, and say, right, how would you sort this mess? If you were to divide Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, between everybody and get them into some sort of coalition or separate enclaves or whatever, so that they could all live in peace, what would your solution be? Because everybody...
I tried, Anne, to describe it. Let me be more specific. I believe that first of all, the entirety of Israel-Palestine is smaller than one single park in South Africa. The Kruger National Park is bigger than the entire Israel-Palestine territory, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. So we're talking about an exceedingly small piece of land. I supported the partition of the country into a Palestinian state and the state of Israel. I supported that, but it is no longer on the table. First of all, it never happened in 30 years. It's not going to happen. And in any case, once you have paved the area that is supposed to be the Palestinian state with settlements which are towns of thousands of people, once you have demolished and ethnically cleansed the eastern part of Jerusalem so that it cannot be the capital of the Palestinian state envisaged by Oslo, then that partition is no longer feasible. And therefore, I fall back on the democratic solution of a single state of Israel-Palestine. After all, that's what we would support anywhere else. When Mandela was asked by the white minority in South Africa from the Orange Free State to give them the Orange Free State as a white state in the new South Africa, Mandela answered, "We don't believe in white states or black states. We believe in democratic states where every person is equal under the law and their rights are guaranteed in a constitution." If it was the right solution for South Africa, it seems to me the only solution for Israel-Palestine. But we are not proscribing any views here. Hence, your different view to mine was especially welcome. So please let me know your point of view on the numbers that are regularly coming up on the screen. Now, let me give you the results of the biggest poll we have ever had. 6,192 people were polled, and the result is, who's to blame for the war in Gaza? A, Hamas, 33%, B, Netanyahu, 42%, and C, the USA and Great Britain, steady actually more or less at 25%. Thank you for participating in that poll. And let me go now to the news with Jamie Lowe.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
At least 42 people have been killed by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza in the deadliest single attack since the start of heavy fighting. Rescuers raced to pull survivors and bodies from the rubble of 3 flattened buildings after the attack in Gaza City, which also left 50 wounded. Gaza health officials said 10 women and 8 children were among those killed, bringing the number who have died in Gaza to 181, including 52 children. 10 people, including 2 children, have been killed in Israel. The Israeli military says it's bombed the home of the political leader of the Palestinian group Hamas in a new wave of airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. It released a video of an exploding bomb, which it said had hit the home of Yahya Sinwar, the group's overall leader in the territory. He is believed to be in hiding. Medical group MSF said that one of its clinics was among the sites damaged by overnight Israeli aerial bombardment. As hostilities stretched into a 7th day, rockets were fired into Israel, and both Israel and Hamas insisted they would continue their cross-border fire dispute. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres reminding all sides that, quote, indiscriminate targeting of civilian and media structures violates international law. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to, quote, continue to respond forcefully to rocket attacks. Israel says it's recorded nearly 3,000 rocket launches since Monday. The UN Security Council is due to discuss the situation later today. The UK has increasing confidence that COVID-19 vaccinations work against the Indian variant of the virus, the Health Secretary has said. Scientists believe that the variant is more transmissible and cases of it nearly tripled to 1,313 in the past week in England. However, Matt Hancock said early lab data showed vaccines remained effective. He said the majority of those in hospital in Bolton, a hotspot for the Indian variant, were unvaccinated. The Health Secretary said the variant was, quote, relatively widespread in small numbers in most of the country. It comes as England is due to move to stage 3 of the government's roadmap for easing lockdown on Monday, with socialising in groups of 6 indoors as well as some international travel to be allowed. On Friday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned the variant could pose, quote, serious disruption to the final stage of lockdown easing in England on June the 21st. Matt Hancock has defended his role in helping a former Conservative minister to try to secure a PPE deal at the start of the pandemic. The Sunday Times newspaper reported he personally intervened to help Brooks Newmark in getting the £180 million deal. Hancock told the BBC's Andrew Marshall it was perfectly reasonable for him to send an email when the country needed medical equipment. The newspaper published a series of emails between Hancock and Newmark, the former civil society minister, who resigned in 2014 after sending sexually explicit photographs of himself to an undercover journalist. The paper reported that in May 2020, Newmark teamed up with the owner of a dog food company who'd set up a firm, Life Partners, to broker PPE deals for international supplies. It said Newmark first emailed the Health Secretary on the 27th of May last year detailing a proposal explaining he had links to well-connected and powerful people in China, but that he needed government help in accelerating deals. The newspaper said the Department of Health awarded a £178 million contract for protective goggles to the firm on the 1st of June. One of the most vaccinated countries in the world is experiencing a COVID-19 outbreak. While other nations struggle to secure enough vaccines, the Seychelles is in the enviable position of having already fully immunised more than 61.4% of its population. But that hasn't been enough to stop the spread of COVID. Over the past month, case numbers have been rising in the Indian Ocean archipelago, prompting authorities to impose restrictions in the country of 98,000 people. Data released on Thursday shows that there are more than 2,700 active cases. Of the current active cases, 33% have been fully vaccinated. Experts and local officials, however, say the Seychelles outbreak isn't a sign that the vaccines aren't working. Police Scotland has said many more arrests will follow what it described as disgraceful scenes as Rangers fans celebrated in Glasgow city centre. 3 police officers were injured and 20 people arrested as crowds were dispersed due to rising disorder. Thousands of fans had taken to the streets after the Rangers' first Scottish Premiership title win in a decade. Police broke up the crowds after about 5 hours due to rising disorder, with one officer suffering a serious facial injury. Myanmar's military has entered a small town in western Chin state which took up arms against them 3 weeks ago. Activists from the volunteer Chinland Defence Force say they have retreated from Mindat to spare the town further bombardment. Mindat is one of several towns where opponents of the military have armed themselves. For 3 weeks, they have been fighting against local people, armed mainly with homemade hunting guns. And dozens of soldiers are reported to have been killed. The rebels said 6 of their fighters had died. Nearly 800 people have died in mainly unarmed protests at February's coup, which ousted the elected government. And finally, it's a tale of 2 tigers. The first, Ratna, a 17-year-old Sumatran tiger which lives at the Sherpeth Wildlife Park near Cambridge in England, has had its eye saved in what's believed to be the first ever operation in its type in the world on a big cat. Staff noticed her left eye, which had previously had a cataract removed, was deteriorating, and a corneal ulcer was diagnosed by a specialist eye vet. Surgeon Dr. David Williams from the Queen's Veterinary School Hospital at the University of Cambridge said after 2 months of careful monitoring, he was delighted to be able to sign Ratna off as fully healed. And in Houston, Texas, a young tiger was spotted roaming around before it was captured. India, a 9-month-old tiger, had been spotted last Sunday in the west of the city and was nearly shot by an off-duty deputy. Commander Ron Borza said it was not clear where the tiger had been in the week since the sighting, but the owner, whose name he gave as Gia, had brought the animal to police. Bawser said Gear was not yet facing any criminal charges, but he confirmed that keeping an animal such as a tiger within the city boundaries is illegal. And that's your latest here on Sputnik News. I'm Jerry Lowe.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Some people can't live without an enemy. The USSR was their enemy that justified unlimited expenditure on weaponry and military confrontation. The Cold War was an industry for legions of cold warriors in the media, in academia, in think tanks all over the world. And then after 9/11, the enemy was the other, the Muslim countries that had to be invaded one by one, even though in invading them and toppling their leaders, we were guaranteeing the rise of the kind of fanatic, extremized Islamic fundamentalism that we have seen now in country after country, including even in the case of Lee Rigby here on the streets of our own capital here in London and in the United States. This fanatic Islamist is now a thing directly as a result of the attacks on the other, the enemy, that we were told now rose like a phoenix from the ashes of the end of the Cold War. Russia's still an enemy for a lot of sheep, even though Russia is a normal capitalist country just like ours. It's a European country. It's the biggest European country. Moscow is the biggest city in Europe, yet we are regularly invited to regard Russia as the other, as the enemy. But there is no doubt that Russia is now being surpassed as the enemy without by China. We'll be showing you a brand new video quite soon in the next hour about China and Hong Kong in particular, but we thought that we would launch this poll just to see how people think out there. Is China a threat to the world? A, yes. B, no. You can vote on my Twitter feed. Now, the first of what I hope and pray will be a regular weekly audience. They don't have princesses in America, but if they did, Rachel Blevins would be my pick. For Queen, actually, never mind princess. She is the rising star of US media, but if she ever takes my advice, and she's shown no sign of doing so up till now, she'd enter politics too, because I think she could go all the way. Remember her name, it's Rachel Blevins of RT America. And every week, Rachel, we're going to review the media over the previous week in the United States. So it's a pretty spectacular week that we have started this slot. Tell us what the media treatment of the US-backed Netanyahu assault on Gaza currently looks like.
Yeah, well, George, I know we talk a lot about politics here, and sometimes it's more fun to talk about all the politicians than it is to be involved in politics yourself. But, you know, when it comes to looking at the Biden administration and the media's coverage of it all, we've really seen a lot lacking this week. I mean, we had a week in which the offices housing the Associated Press, Al Jazeera, and a number of other international outlets were attacked by Israel, destroyed. And yet the AP themselves wouldn't even name it in their headline. They wouldn't say that Israel was behind that attack. I mean, we saw other similar coverage of where they would say that there were rockets from Hamas fired, and then suddenly dozens of Palestinians just died. And they wouldn't give any insight, especially, you know, we talk about those headlines. Those are what get you to click on the article. And yet we've seen this coverage that is so skewed, that is so in favor of a U.S. ally. And, you know, it's kind of like where you're talking about there, that enemy of sorts. It seems as though the media has already determined who the enemy is in this conflict, instead of giving actual objective coverage of what's going on the ground. And so if you're a typical member of the public and you're looking at what the media has done this week, that should cause concern all around, because there seems to be this ongoing campaign in Gaza right now to try to silence members of the media, to try to silence their live streaming, their coverage. And that's something that media here in the U.S. should be standing up about. They should be calling out Israel for it. And we should be getting much more, especially from the Biden administration, than just these statements saying that, oh, they care about journalists. If that's the case, then we need to actually start seeing that.
It makes you wonder why Israel bothered to destroy the television station there. Because when you see what the media will do in terms of supplication to the official narrative of the state, you hardly need to. As you pointed out, and full disclosure, Associated Press pays my wages every week, but I have no hesitation in describing their reaction to the destruction of their own studio, their own equipment, their own floors on that building, as being so pitiful as to be beyond and beneath contempt. They couldn't even name who deliberately destroyed their own television station. Why bother? I don't know why Israel bothered to destroy it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it makes you wonder, if this is how it starts, then how is it going to continue? I mean, we're less than a week in. Already dozens of children have been killed. You know, we hear from the Biden administration that they are going to continue to stand by Israel. And yet the criticism in the media of that is so lacking, it's so non-existent, that it should make everyone wonder what their coverage is going to continue to look like, especially over the next few weeks, if this bombing campaign continues, as Netanyahu is indicating that it will.
Now, of course, we are talking about U.S. media that could not find the words for a sustained attack on another of the American allies, Saudi Arabia, which literally chopped into pieces Jamal Khashoggi, a columnist in the Washington Post. Yet his colleagues continue to produce the same slavish copy about Saudi Arabia, even though one of their own colleagues was chopped up and flushed down a drain by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's crazy to see the hypocrisy there, because you saw a media that didn't seem to care at all about a journalist being persecuted, being tortured to death because it was done by a close U.S. ally. And yet these are the same journalists that aren't going to tell you about Julian Assange and aren't going to tell you about his plight and the fact that his life is in danger right now. But at the same time, they will spend days and days of coverage telling you about Alexei Navalny over in Russia, or telling you about China and Russia and how they're the bad guys and how they're silencing dissidents according to the media. And yet when it comes to actual issues of freedom of the press, they seem to have nothing to say about that whatsoever. I mean, you would think that that would be the one issue that they would actually care about.
We have a saying here, Rachel. It will translate: thank God you cannot bribe or twist the average British journalist. But when you see what unbribed he'll do, you realize there's no reason to. That's something that's true on both sides of the ocean. Let's move on to other stories. What are the big stories in the US media this week?
Yeah, well, I think mainly this entire conflict and really what Israel is doing in Gaza right now has been the big story that we've seen covered all around. That has really been the overarching factor that has been seen as sort of the Biden administration's biggest foreign policy challenge here. And there's been a lot of talk about that in a way that it's kind of being used to cover up a lot of what else is going on here in the United States. I mean, we've got concerns about raising grocery store prices. We have concerns about continued inflation, about where the economy is going. And yet you would think that we would see more media coverage of that. But instead, it seems to be surrounding the Biden administration and what they're going to do, which is a legitimate purpose. I mean, there is a lot of questions about why he continues to respond to this conflict in the way that he does. And for the American people, it's kind of just one more thing for them to pay attention to instead of looking at what is going on here at home, instead of looking at where we are, you know, in terms of COVID cases, in terms of states opening up. And so it really is an interesting time for U.S. media, I would say.
And what about Russia and China? Are they getting a break while everyone focuses on Gaza?
You know, I would suppose they are. One of the things that's not mentioned nearly enough this week has been the fact that it has been Russia, the country who is always the bad guy, the country who the United States continues to accuse of threatening the world order. Yet it has been Russia calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, talking, or at least trying to talk with both sides there. They got Hamas to agree to a ceasefire, and then it was Israel who said that they wouldn't agree to it. So it's interesting to see how the media won't even admit to the fact that you've got countries like Russia and China who are their continual big bad guys, so to speak. And yet in the times when they're actually focusing on peace, and it's the United States that is throwing its hat behind Israel and saying that it supports them wholeheartedly, then all of a sudden that media coverage is nowhere to be found.
Well, a good point. I mean, Russia actually tabled a motion to convene the Security Council on Friday. And that Security Council could have demanded an immediate ceasefire. And who knows, it might have happened. And some people who are dead now might still be alive. But the only country, only one, which refused to convene the Security Council and support a ceasefire was the United States of America. It's pretty dismal, Rachel.
It really is. And of course, if you look at the last few decades of U.S. foreign policy and the United States' relationship with Israel, we also have to remember that this is nothing new. But at the same time, we should also be aware of the fact that the United States has a lot of leverage here. I mean, as we speak, the U.S. sends Israel $10.4 million every single day. So when you're seeing President Biden get on the phone with leaders, when you're seeing him talk directly with Netanyahu, we have to remember he could be calling and telling them to stop, telling them to agree to a ceasefire instead of just giving them this ironclad support. And yet there seems to be this overwhelming fear, especially in U.S. politics, this fear of them appearing anti-Israel in any way. And I think that's why right now you're seeing not only Biden make the decisions that he's making, but you're also seeing members of Congress who are staying silent. Even though we've seen some Democrats increasingly speaking out on Twitter or calling for the Biden administration to do more to stop the overwhelming civilian casualties that we're seeing right now, you're not seeing a lot of actual action. You're not seeing members of Congress going to the floor in droves and saying, let's stop this massive military aid that we are giving this country, because right now we are paying for a massacre of children and of civilians. And so it really is a time where, yes, we're seeing more people speaking up about it. But at the end of the day, it seems to be a lot of the same as usual in U.S. politics.
Well, there definitely is a higher base of criticism of Israel this time by comparison with previous massacres, even bigger massacres than this one, although this one's still running. Paris Hilton has issued a démarche. Bella Hadid, the Zayn Malik, the English-born pop star, at the FA Cup final in London at Wembley Stadium, the big football occasion, live on television to 1 billion people. Two of the victorious players for Leicester City Football Club raised the Palestinian flag right in front of the trophy, right in front of the centerpiece of the television coverage. That's undoubtedly true. But so far, it's not having its political impact. Before I let you go, Rachel, and I'm so glad that you're going to be joining me on Sundays regularly to do this, where is Donald Trump? I want to say I'm missing him. I don't mean I'm missing him being the President of the United States. I'm missing him because there's a black hole where he used to be. He has been wiped off social media completely. And I don't know whether he's alive or dead. What news can you bring us?
Well, you know, this week was an interesting one for Republicans, too, because we saw a lot of backlash against Liz Cheney over her support of impeaching Donald Trump. Now, that may tell you that the GOP is considering supporting Trump in 2024, right? But there's also a lot of speculation that what the GOP is doing right now is that they're kind of trying to get their supporters to calm down a little bit. They're trying to tell them it's okay. We're not really trying to oust Trump completely. And you're right, to your point, we haven't seen or heard much from Trump at all now that he's not on social media. And of course, now that his new platform of sorts, as he calls it, isn't gaining a lot of traction. So the question then becomes, who is going to be that next rising Republican star? Because what the GOP is kind of doing right now is they're trying to get all of their voters to calm down, saying that they're not totally trying to oust Trump. But then as we talk less and less about Trump, that gives way for another Republican star to rise up. And then all of a sudden the GOP can say, oh, this one, that's the one we're putting our weight behind in 2024. And so for Trump himself, I think in terms of him really quieting down, it doesn't seem like he's making much of an effort to really speak out and be heard right now. And it seems like with any of the statements that he makes, is a lot of the same old, same old. So I think in order for him to really gain traction, he's going to have to find ways not just to speak out, but also to network with other people who are actually allowed on social media. So we'll see. Maybe here in the next few weeks, we'll hear more from him. But as of right now, you're right. It seems like a black hole in media coverage where they used to talk about Donald Trump 24/7. Who knew that we would come to this point?
Who knew that we would end up missing the big orange man? Thank you very much indeed, Rachel Blevins. See you next week, God willing. Remember her name, Rachel Blevins, a rising star. I was one of the first to identify her as such. Let me take a quick break, and then we've got the effervescent, irrepressible Patrick Christys to talk about the media here in Britain. Don't miss it.
Radio Sputnik.
Call me. Come and have a go. If you think you're hard enough, don't bring up a false name. Come on air. Call me and let's have this matter out.
Let's get ready to rumble!
How have you got the nerve to tell people to Brexit if you're not telling them the repercussions?
That's 2016's argument, Michael. I'm no longer arguing with you about the merits of Brexit. I'm arguing with you about democracy, about the right of the majority to have their decision, their vote implemented.
This match will get red hot.
Not have a referendum. Let them have a referendum. Let them sort it out amongst themselves.
I want a referendum. Robert, I want a referendum. Let me put that in capital letters. If you think this year, which is shaping up already to be an annus miserabilis for the SNP, if you think this is your year, go ahead. Come on. Let's have it out.
It's on.
But no, George, it's not as simple as that, right? Have you seen the documentary about Cambridge Analytica and the people who work there? Have you looked at the global
I know nothing about them. I'm not interested in them.
Precisely. But because you don't know about them.
I'm not interested in them, Bruce, because it's all a red herring. Just like Russiagate was a red herring.
You're up.
Do you only want to hear voices that agree with you? Because if you do, you're not clever enough to be at this open university of the airwaves. In fact, you need to go back to remedial and learn something about what democracy and freedom of speech actually mean.
Tough questions are the most powerful weapon we have. As long as you have questions, we'll keep asking. Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Well, I'm kind of lucky that I never actually look at newspapers anymore. I'm just touching them, wondering how many trees were felled to produce them. But I would have missed the front page splash in The Sun on Sunday. Their big story is not Gaza. It's not even COVID. It's that Marcus Rashford and his girlfriend of 8 years have split up. So sad. But the biggest news of the day for probably the biggest selling newspaper in Britain, what does that tell us? Tells us there's a lot of sheep in Britain, and that's borne out by the results so far of my poll. Is China a threat to the world? 70% say yes. Only 30% say no. And that's 1,134 people have responded. What's wrong with you people? Get voting on my Twitter feed. Now, I hope I'm joined by the literally irrepressible, popping up everywhere on all media. I was one of the first to recognize his impending greatness too. It's Patrick Christys, the broadcaster and also journalist. Patrick, let me, in welcoming you, ask if you've recovered from the news, the splash in The Sun on Sunday, that Sir Marcus has split up from his girlfriend. What kind of news judgment decides that that is the big story in the world today?
I thought it was absolutely outrageous, to be honest with you. I can't help but wonder whether or not Marcus Rashford got one in the eye over the whole free school meals for kids thing, over potentially some more of the establishment media and certainly some elements of the Conservative Party, and perhaps now they've been bottling something up, waiting for it. I just wonder if there's something behind this, whether or not he's turned down an interview with them in the past or something and they've thought, go on, we'll splash it. But look, I personally don't care. What I do care about is that he keeps banging the goals in for Manchester United.
He's not doing enough of that, I've got to say. And there are some rather important games coming up, but you and I have a bias on that, yes, as we are both supporters of Sir Marcus, as we call him and as we are determined to make him, and Manchester United. But what else was rattling in the press today?
Well, there's been a lot going about, actually. I mean, the main thing, I suppose you could say, is what's going on with Israel and Palestine at the moment, and the ongoing issues there. That's showing no sign of abating. And it's interesting that people...
It didn't make the front... It made the front page sharing it with COVID.
Yes.
In the pro-war Observer. But it didn't make it in the Independent. It didn't make it in the Telegraph, and it didn't make it in the Sun. And it didn't make it in the Mirror. It is rather odd that the American media is covering what's happening in Gaza more than the British media, don't you think?
I'm very surprised at it, actually, especially with some more of the left-wing newspapers as well. I'm also quite surprised, though I shouldn't be, that there was a massive rally taking place in London yesterday. That's got next to no news coverage, having said that there's been numerous rallies that have taken place in central London quite recently, things like the anti-lockdown measures, etc., and they've had minimal coverage as well, so maybe newspapers just aren't bothering sending reporters out there anymore. There are calls for Boris Johnson to basically come out and swinging for one side or the other on this. Clearly, he's backing Israel in this particular fight. It is quite literally a fight now. And it's an interesting moment, this, for Boris Johnson, because, of course, Jeremy Corbyn, one of the big things that was levelled at him, rightly or wrongly, one of the big things that was levelled at him when he stood for election were issues of anti-Semitism. Now, Boris Johnson, there's that famous video of him in Golders Green in London being surrounded by a lot of Hasidic Jews, all of them chanting for him. And I think he's very, very aware of that voter base now. And if he says anything negative about Israel, then that could have quite serious consequences. I do also think, realistically as well, that for a lot of Boris Johnson's base, They're looking at these almost kind of morbidly fascinating footage, really, of the Iron Dome, Israel's Iron Dome. And they're seeing, a lot of rockets being fired into that. And I think Boris Johnson possibly would feel a bit squiffy saying that Israel couldn't essentially defend itself. Of course, the lengths they go to is up for question.
Of course, he's also under pressure on COVID.
Yes.
My take from these front pages, Patrick, is that particularly the liberal media is determined to stop any return to normality in Britain.
Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I was absolutely sick to the core about the press conference that we had with Boris Johnson on Friday. I wasn't sick about what he had to say. I can understand if we have a new Indian variant and that's a cause for concern. I understand that he's got some very cautious men in suits, medical men in suits next to him, and that he always has to have that in the back of his mind. But having said that, you listen to a lot of people from Sky News or these other ones. It's like they actually want us chained to our own radiators for the rest of our lives, for goodness sake. You're seeing the likes of them come out there and say, actually, will you regret it? Do you think you will come to regret it if you don't keep us all locked down with this new Indian variant? They're saying things like there's been an increase of 120% in cases in Blackburn and Darwin. Yeah, that's still only 21 cases, right? There's still only 12 cases of this new Indian variant in Northern Ireland, right? Which is, not that many cases per person. Let's be perfectly honest with you. It's just more than a football team, right? So, look, I think we need to put this in a bit of context. However, what I do suspect might be something that's coming around the corner, and something that you always have to watch out for with Boris Johnson, is that despite whether or not he stays strong with SAGE and sticks to these 4 tests, which are the first 2 in order to keep to stop the restrictions being eased. The first 2 relate to have we got enough vaccines. Absolutely unequivocally, we've knocked that one out the park. The third one relates to have we got enough hospital capacity. Again, yes, hospitals not going to be overwhelmed, but the fourth one is about new variants of concern, and this is where we're on a bit of a sticky wicket when it comes to this Indian variant. The question is, how new is it, and actually is Boris responsible for letting it in the first place?
Well, there is that argument that he should have seen this coming. He's allowed tens of thousands of people to fly into Britain from India. That strikes me as exceedingly unwise. But I argued from the beginning of this crisis that being an island, we were actually able to stop everybody from coming in here, and we could have lived a normal life for the last 12 months.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is the thing. The only thing now that would ever send us back into a lockdown or delay lockdown restrictions being eased is if there's a new variant that's more resistant to the vaccine, more transmissible and more deadly. Now, thankfully, touch wood, so far this Indian variant that we're seeing apparently is around 50% more transmissible. So far, they're saying that the data that they've seen in the medical community doesn't seem to show that it's any more resistant to the vaccine. In fact, the opposite came out today with Matt Hancock, who was doing the rounds in quite a lot of the media, saying, actually, he's now very confident that the vaccines that we currently have do work and are good enough against this new Indian variant. But the big question, as you've rightly said there, George, is why on earth did we even take that chance? The question mark really was, apparently, Boris Johnson was desperate to go to India to try to shore up a big bumper trade deal with Modi, the most democratically elected man on earth. And actually, you know what? He didn't go anyway, and we still got the trade deal. So leaving the border open with India was an absolute high-risk move that we didn't need to take. And I think a lot of citizens in this country do think, as they rightly should, the first duty of a Prime Minister or any leader is ultimately to protect your own citizens. And Boris left the door, quite literally left the door open there for a while,
Now, my good friend Andrew Neil is about to launch his television station, which is a rival to the BBC.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a potent threat to the BBC, not least because you don't have to pay to watch it, whereas you'll go to prison if you don't pay to watch the BBC. What's your take on GB News?
Look, I think fundamentally, from a very, I suppose, media insider view, it's creating jobs in media, which is nice. It's a really good thing generally if you're inside the industry. More work, that's always great, especially after the year that we've had. But also, I think it's a real shame, I think, that it's needed, that it's necessary, and that before we've even seen a single second of footage on GB News, it's already got mass popularity and people are looking at it lovingly already. It's a real shame that we've been put in a situation as a country where we have a state broadcaster that you have to pay for, as you rightly said you have to pay for on pain of going to prison. I mean, flipping heck, the BBC quite often comes out and does quite hard-hitting documentaries on the plight of elderly people and loneliness. At the same time, wanted to start making some of the poorest, oldest members of society pay for the privilege of watching Bargain Hunt or whatever, you know, on threat of them going to prison. It was crazy. I think GB News is a welcome addition. What I will say though is for a lot of people there that just think it's going to be essentially, you know, right-wing TV, it's not going to be that. They have made some quite shrewd appointments from across the political spectrum. I just am very interested to see how it goes. But yeah, it's sad that we live in a country where it's such a necessary thing because our state broadcaster is letting us down so badly.
Yeah, because the perception of a large number of people, including me, as someone who is on the left, is that the BBC hates Britain. It certainly hates the British. It doesn't like their ways, their views, their political decisions. It doesn't like that they voted for Brexit. It doesn't like that they voted for Boris Johnson and gave him a landslide majority. It doesn't like our attitude as a people towards all these liberal, woke identity politics obsessions. They are an endless parade of virtue signalling and wokeness. And that's not what the British people as a majority are.
No.
So, as you say, GB News is starting off with an open door to the millions of people who feel that way. If even I feel that way, and I regard the media as a whole as unutterably right-wing, if even I feel that way, it's quite a big potential market, don't you think, Patrick?
Look, I agree 100%, literally 100% with everything that you just said, actually. I think the BBC has crossed the Rubicon from being a news source to trying to actually influence people's thoughts. And that's a very dangerous game to start playing. I would argue that's a deeply concerning game to start playing. When you start being led by the nose by a news organisation as opposed to them just reporting the unadulterated fact, that's when you're in trouble. Now, OK, yes, you get that in the Sun, you get that in the Daily Mail, you get that in the Telegraph, but you go out and you freely choose to go and buy those things, right? That's a market choice. The BBC, despite the fact that yes, you still have to pay for it, it's got an ever-present permanent market presence. And the fact is that realistically, most people just flick it on and have it on in the background. And it does have a higher duty. It does have a duty to hold itself to a higher standard, in my opinion, than a lot of the red tops, for example, right? And they're not doing that. And so when we are seeing things rammed down our throats relentlessly, if you tune onto the BBC now, I mean, don't, because you'd be missing out on this, but if you decided to tune into the BBC now, I can guarantee you would hear one of several things on their radio stations. It would either be a women's rights issue, an LGBTQ plus issue, it would be something race related, or it would be something social issues related, right? That's what you're getting, a variation of the same thing every single minute of every single day. And people actually don't want that. And you're right there. They've got, in my opinion now, the BBC has got a real crisis of identity with its audience. Instead of recognising how most people think in this country, and you can check that based on the fact that we vote on stuff occasionally, they are actually just deciding that they're holier than thou and they're higher than the people that they dictate to. And you know what? They'll lose out because of that.
Patrick, I look forward to jousting with you every Sunday from now on the mother of all talk shows. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, in the wake of the deeply disturbing numbers I'm reading here on our second poll of the evening, I told you there was an important new video coming out. It's about Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is one of the issues that is used by those that are determined to persuade you to hate and fear China, when in fact China has rather more historically to hate and fear us about, not least in Hong Kong. Take a look at this video from How So Then.
Lies, deception, interference. It was an age of shame and intimidation. Isn't the Hong Kong hypocrisy over? Apparently not. At the Two Sessions 2021, China passed a new law for the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, Patriots governing Hong Kong. The British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab put out this statement. This is the latest step by Beijing to hollow out the space for democratic debate in Hong Kong, contrary to the promise made by China itself. One moment, stop, Mr. Raab. When you were elected Member of Parliament, you had to pledge allegiance to the Queen before you could even sit in the Commons benches. Every MP has to do so before they can take their seat or receive their wages. Come to think of it, that's why you don't see Northern Ireland's Sinn Féin in the Houses of Parliament. They, of course, would never bow to the Queen. Anyway, I really don't see the difference between the latest regulations in Hong Kong and pledging allegiance in the Houses of Parliament. Britain practicing a law procedure whilst condemning a similar one in China, that's hypocrisy, right? Actually, the word hypocrisy doesn't even come close. The UK stole Hong Kong from China by force to punish China for cracking down on the empire's opium trade, and then ruled it for a century and a half. In all that time, they didn't give a damn about democracy. Now that Hong Kong has returned to China, the British are all over it like a rash, demanding the right to use it as a Trojan horse inside the Chinese gates. They want to influence the laws that should be applied to the violent rioting that they themselves encouraged, which at one stage looked like it could burn Hong Kong to the ground. They're using Hong Kong, as they use other areas of China, like Tibet and Xinjiang, as a stick to beat China, to slow it down, and if possible, to divide it. So no, Dominic Raab, this is not the latest step by Beijing to hollow out space for democratic debate in Hong Kong. Their new measures for lawmakers are no different to the ones in place in the UK. It's the British government and that building there, not China, that needs to apologise over Hong Kong.
Excellent. Well done, Household, then. You can have your say on that or everything else. The show is now yours. Let's take a call from Alaska. How could we resist that? David in Alaska, welcome to the show. David? I've got some social media I can fill in with. Mahana says Israel wouldn't have been born without Britain and wouldn't have survived without the US. Palestine's longest occupation, suffering apartheid, ethnic cleansing, imprisonment, blockades and murder of anyone who stands up against them. And Jonathan says the Israeli administration is pulling the trigger enabled by the USA and UK. And all this was set up by us in the UK. Another post-colonial outrage. Freya, on the other hand, says the folks who started the rocket launchers, Hamas. And Phoebe, F-I-E-B-E, Phoebe, says UK gifting land which was not theirs to give away, US giving cover and aid to continued atrocities. David is there now in Alaska. Long way away. David, most welcome.
Good morning again, George. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. I hope you are well.
By the grace of God, I am. Thank you.
I am very glad to hear that. Yes, what I wanted to bring up is rather large in scope, but begins with a group of nations, but starting with Israel and the United States, and how they managed to put a rocket base in on Kodiak Island that was determined for peaceful purposes, period, and that would be it. And in the ensuing years, it's come about that Israel is testing their rockets with Raytheon now, and their rockets being used for warfare and expressly, unfortunately, on so many levels, being tried out on the Palestinians first in many cases. But what ties this in to the third country is Germany, which, out of a sense of guilt that has gone on for way too long, has given Israel nuclear missile capable submarines over the past 10 years, and now they have 6 of them. And all of a sudden this comes full circle back to Alaska even, and I'm very distressed by this. I am much more worried about Israel with nuclear weapons than I am with China or Russia or anybody. I just think it's a wild card that we've suddenly got to contend with, but it generally goes unspoken.
Yes, it does indeed. The IAEA has never asked to inspect the Israeli nuclear weapons base in the desert, which the brave Israeli whistleblower Mordechai Vanunu told us about more than 30 years ago. And still they have not asked to see underneath the sand of the Negev, the very place where Israel holds more than 200 nuclear weapons. Afraid you should be. Thanks very much, David, for the call. Let's stay in the United States, go to Virginia and talk to Nasir in Virginia. Go ahead, Nasir.
Assalamu alaikum, George. How are you?
Alaikum salam. Nice to hear from you. Go ahead.
I'm, number one, a very huge fan, especially after watching the Senate hearings, which was, I think it's 13 years ago. But I watch it once in a while just to reset and get inspired by the words that were said. But I guess it's a 6-0, 6-0, 6-0 match. And so thank you so much for having that discussion.
Thank you so much.
But I just want to level set about Israel and just take a broader kind of perspective on why is it that between 10 and I think 20 million Jews on this planet have this entitlement to have their own homeland. If every enclave of 10 or 20 million people wake up one day and say, you know what, we deserve our own homeland, it'd be 1,000, I don't know how many countries, you have 7 billion people on this planet. And why is it that this small population that identifies themselves as Jewish, quote unquote, more like Zionists, and we won't get into the distinction here yet because I'm sure we don't want to.
No, it's not that. We can do that anytime, but the hour is late, and that will definitely cut short how deep we can get into that. But go on, finish your point.
So that's point number one. My point number two for a solution is why don't we just rename Palestine and Israel to Musa land? As you know, Musa is a word for Prophet Moses. And if we all just say, okay, the laws of Prophet Moses are going to apply to this land equally and to all, then neither Christian nor Jew nor Muslim would have a problem with that. But the problem is that no one wants to really do that, right? They have their own agenda, and it's about the money. And as you say, it's not about the prophets, Musa. It's about the prophets with the dollar sign or the...
Well,
right?
And of course, I know Israel exceedingly well. I've spent a lot of time there. I'm here to tell you that the great majority of Israeli citizens never go to Jerusalem. It's far too religious for them there, too much religious extremism for them there. It's no accident that they prefer Tel Aviv, they prefer the beach, they prefer the Mediterranean cafe lifestyle. There are not that many as a percentage of the whole Israeli population, people demanding the right to a Musa land. They'd run a mile, a lot of them, if forced to follow the teachings of Moses.
Right.
Every religion cannot have self-determination because, of course, you can convert to a religion. You could not possibly have Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons demanding the right to a state. But there are two exceptional issues here that must be raised. First of all, Israel already exists. So arguments about whether it ought to have existed are otiose because it exists. It's a powerful state. It's a nuclear-armed state. It's a state with the support of almost every government in the world. So it's going to continue to exist. Therefore, what now needs to happen, therefore, is a discussion about what kind of state this is to be. And that's why I advance the argument for a democratic state of Israel-Palestine, in which the three religions coexist. They might hate each other for a very long time, but then there's a lot of white people in South Africa hate the black majority government there. There's a lot of people on the black nationalist side who hate the fact that so many white people in South Africa are still the most prosperous with the most land and so on. That might be true. But I can think of no other way in which this matter can be resolved other than on the basis of one man, one woman, one vote of all three of the monotheistic faiths there. Thank you, Nasir, for that call. Andrew is in Newcastle, but on the same subject. Andrew, welcome.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
My question is a bit more broad. It's not particularly connected to the conflict at the moment, but more on the elections that were postponed recently. I was following it relatively closely and have been looking at leadership candidates for a while, and not just the Mahmoud Abbas and the general candidates on the ballot paper, but more at some of the different candidates like Marwan Barghouti, Ashwan Ashwari, possibly even Munab al-Mazri if he was to stand. I wanted to say, I know you've had quite a few meetings with various different people in Palestine, Hamas, Fatah. Who would you vote for? Who would you propose as a leadership candidate for whether it's be Fatah or whether it was be for the PLO? And also, how would you look to try and engage someone like Munab al-Mazri, who didn't particularly want to stand for election, perhaps get someone a bit more mainstream to the front of the ballot paper?
Well, that would be a gross intrusion for me on this platform to intervene in someone else's election in that way. But I do think I'm qualified to say, and have a right to say, someone who's given more than 50 years of my life to this cause, that the PLO isn't working. The Palestine National Authority current leadership isn't working. And with all my heart, I appeal to the people in Fatah to renew themselves, to find a new leadership, a younger and fresher leadership, because it's abundantly clear that the National Authority and the ruling party in it and the PLO representing all Palestinians outside as well as inside isn't working and needs to, if the tremendous imbalance in power is to be addressed. But thanks, Andrew, for a very intelligent call. I'm very grateful for it. Kenny is in Rockville in Maryland, maybe the last caller. Go ahead, Kenny.
Hey, thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
First time, I just want to say, shout out, I have to do this as an American. Shout out to my good friend Dante over there in Ukraine serving the cause at a good fight. I just want to talk about this Israel-Palestine as an American.
Yeah.
Let me just say, first of all, in the news, you don't know really anything other than Israel is being attacked. And as a person, a human on this planet, I have to say that obviously what is happening in the Israel-Palestine is, as an American, I can say is almost the same problem that the African-American community wants to complain about with the establishment in whatever regard. Cops, the man, the government, in the same regard. It's not as extreme.
No, well, it's, I mean, at least African Americans have got a vote. They are often suppressed.
Well, exactly.
They're often,
exactly.
gerrymandered and suppressed, but they do in the end have the right to vote. The millions of Palestinians living since 1967 under Israeli occupation have no right to vote.
Exactly. And that's what I feel Americans have to understand, is that the same plight that they want to complain about in their own country is 1,000 times worse than the plight that that other people are legitimately complaining about in their own country. And I feel like the Americans have this depth perception feeling as to it, as it's not the same because it's different. And I really wish Americans would understand the similarities and not be so and so cast by the Disneyland of it, if that makes sense, George.
Yeah, it does. And I wish that we had more time to tease out some of the issues that you've raised. I'm sure that this story is going to run and run, whatever happens in the course of the next 7 days. And I have no reason at all to believe that the killing is going to stop anytime soon. But the show has to stop because we have reached the end of our time. It's been quite a remarkable show. It's been the mother of all talk shows, at least from my standpoint, and I hope from yours. If you agree, then please spread the word and come back here next week at the same time in the same place. You can watch us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. You can listen to us on Sputnik News, and you can listen to us, may have done so. Oh my goodness, it's our 100th edition. We've got a birthday cake. 100 editions. I'm not eating this, but it says Moats 100. It's been marvelous.